Chapter 1442. It had to be said that Ji Lingxi's question was unnecessary. The Chen family was in ruins now. Even if all the members of the Chen family knelt before little Fatty and asked him to be their ancestor, he would not be interested, let alone be the head of the family. Moreover, little Fatty really had no longing for the Chen family. Little Fatty Chen Duo was one of the founders of the Palace of Nine Supremes, the major domo who was second only to the emperor. After experiencing the process of building the Palace of Nine Supremes from scratch, his yearning for the Palace of Nine Supremes was enough to override everything else. The Palace of Nine Supremes was his home. Even if little Fatty was foolish and blinded by greed, he would not want to leave home. Moreover, Chen Duo was the one who understood the Palace of Nine Supremes the most, the one who could see the potential of the Palace of Nine Supremes. Little Fatty shook his head like a rattle drum. Gu Chaoyang sighed in disappointment. What Ji Lingxi had asked earlier was actually the result of Gu Chaoyang's prolonged pleading. It was not Yun Yang's intention at all. Gu Chaoyang had set his eyes on the position of the Palace of Nine Supremes major domo since the beginning of the merger. It could even be said that Gu Chaoyang had set his eyes on the position since the merger. He felt that no one would be more suitable than he was. Gu Chaoyang thought that his cultivation base and aptitude were probably at this level so far. Perhaps he could still become a saint after years of hard work. However, it was impossible for him to advance further. If there was no hope of advancing further, he would need something to hold the Palace of Nine Supremes. What could he do? Was he going to be a charlatan forever? The position of major domo was a job tailor-made for him. However, there was someone else in the position now, and it was someone he could never touch under normal circumstances. If Chen Duo did not resign, he would have no hope of ascending the position. It was also because of this reason that Gu Chaoyang had forcefully predicted God's will, hoping for a turning point. Using the Chen family's legend as a foundation, he had asked Ji Lingxi for Chen Duo's help and asked for Chen Duo's thoughts. If Chen Duo really returned to the Chen family and took charge of the family, Gu Chaoyang would naturally ascend the position. This would be a turning point for Gu Chaoyang, a 1 in a million chance. Since Ji Lingxi came to the bound of universe, Gu Chaoyang had helped her a great deal. It was out of courtesy that he had come forward to ask, but little Fatty had not thought of it at all. In fact, from the moment Ji Lingxi asked the question, little Fatty had lowered his head in contemplation. It looked like he was pondering Ji Lingxi's question, but he was actually sending a message to Yun Yang. Yun Yang replied through the Nine Supremes token, "I didn't say that. Damn, I've been exposed." With Yun Yang's detailed reply, how could the fatty not understand the situation before him? His gaze towards Gu Chaoyang was tinged with murderous intent. This old bastard, how dare he trick me? You want to gain power? Daring to target Lord Fatty's position. You don't want to think about it. Your father will make life difficult for you in the future. Ji Lingxi was also discussing with Gu Chaoyang. I've asked for you. Major Domo Chen has no intention of stepping down. Don't say this again in the future. Actually, I think it's good that you're a deputy major domo. Chen Duo is in charge of the residents of Nine Supremes' external business. After this battle against the Chen family, he'll probably spend more time traveling the trade routes outside. The family will definitely need another internal major domo. Such a large family business can't be managed by him alone. Chen Duo is the Palace of Nine Supremes' founding elder after all. It's already too much for me to help you this time. In the future, it's more important to build a good relationship. Gu Chaoyang thought about it and agreed that it was reasonable. In addition, he had only managed to find a turning point when Ji Lingxi's question was fruitless. The general trend was on Chen Duo's side. He would only be finding trouble for himself if he continued to oppose him. Gu Chaoyang had always been a man who obeyed fate. After the fruitless attempt this time, his resentment faded away and he took the initiative to look for Chen Duo. Brother Chen, regarding the Chen family, you're from the Chen family after all and you're the victim. Do you have any additional conditions? Just say it, we'll give you some advice. No matter what, I'll make sure this matter is done beautifully for you. Gu Chaoyang spoke in a tone of complete sincerity. Since they were going to work together in the future, of course, Gu Chaoyang had to build a relationship first. In spite of this, Chen Duo looked at this fellow who was about to kick him out of his position warily. Brother Gu, you have something to say. Ha! Brother Gu, your name reminds me of hiring an assassin. Gu Chaoyang's face twitched. Brother Qian. Brother Gu, you're not really planning to hire an assassin, are you? Little Fatty chuckled as he looked at Gu Chaoyang. Gu Chaoyang felt like his stomach was about to explode. Is there something wrong with this little fatty? I'm here to express my goodwill and discuss a problem with you. What are you talking about? You must be joking, Brother Qian. Gu Chaoyang's usual arrogance came online at once as he said with a fake smile. Brother Qian, I have to say that you, Brother Qian, remind me of a young lady's bosom. Qian Duo put on a fake smile and said, Brother Gu, you're wrong. Can't a man have a bosom? You're being far-fetched. It doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Ha ha ha. Brother Qian's mind is bright. I'm impressed. Ha ha. Brother Gu's foresight is flawless. I'm impressed. Ha ha. Brother Qian. Ha ha. Brother Gu. Brother Qian, you still have to work hard. Brother Gu, a man's reputation has to be won on the battlefield. How can a crooked path last? I heard that Brother Gu has always followed heaven's will and accepted your fate. I hope that you won't change your original intention. Don't forget your original intention and follow through. Gu Chaoyang felt like his lungs were about to explode. Why is this fatty so annoying? It's your fortune that your father is willing to support you. Do you know how many people your father has actively supported in this lifetime? How dare you act so pretentiously? Gu Chaoyang had always thought highly of himself and looked askance at everyone in the world. It was so in Tianxian continent, and it was still the same when he came to the bound of universe. Back when he was facing Mr. Nian, he was still arrogant despite being imprisoned for a long time. He had schemed against Qian Duo, but now that he had taken the initiative to be friendly, he was ridiculed instead. It was only natural that he found it hard to accept. At this point, it was hard to continue, and the two parted on bad terms. On the other side, Ji Lingxi sent a message to Yun Yang. The Palace of Nine Supremes is too vast. It's inevitable that it'll be overstretched if there's only one major domo. Is it possible to add Gu Chaoyang as one of the major domo of the Palace of Nine Supremes? Qian Duo started the family as an elder. It's not appropriate for someone to be on equal footing with him all of a sudden, Yun Yang replied. Gu Chaoyang has to convince Qian Duo himself. Only then can both of them work together. Before Qian Duo is convinced, he can only be given part of the major domo's authority without an actual title. Ji Lingxi thought about it carefully and realized that what Yun Yang said made sense. Although Gu Chaoyang and Yun Yang were old acquaintances and had unfathomable means, most people did not know that she and Yun Yang were aware of this. If he were to appoint Gu Chaoyang directly, it would not only give off a feeling of nepotism, but it would also chill the hearts of the residents of Nine Supremes elders. Ji Lingxi called Gu Chaoyang over discreetly and said, We can only fulfill the major domo's duty first. We still have to consider the title. If we want to set the title early, the first thing we have to do is to convince Qian Duo. It'll be even better if more people, including Qian Duo, recommend him. With Elder Gu's almighty ability, you can even predict God's will. What's a trifling matter? What's a trifling matter? Gu Chaoyang was filled with bitterness now. Heaven's will was not to be deceived indeed. Gu Chaoyang was not courteous at all. He had schemed and planned to ascend early, but now he had to swallow his words. If he had known this would happen, why would he have played those petty tricks? Now that little fatty is like a snake when he sees me, avoiding me like the plague. I don't even have a target to aim for. How am I going to convince him? With little fatty standing in front of me, how can anyone recommend me? Speaking of friendship, they're old acquaintances. Due to this incident, he had almost become enemies with little fatty, and little fatty had become someone he couldn't get around. At least for now, little fatty was his immediate superior. He had actually fallen into a position where he could only work without a title. What the F***CK? F***CK. I've been calculating a few days ago and there's a turning point, but there's a sudden change. Turns out that the turning point should be here. I've really shot myself in the foot. I've committed suicide. I've committed suicide. Gu Chaoyang was dispirited. Still, it's not impossible to handle this kid. With his personality that brightens up with a little bit of sunshine, I don't believe I can't coax him as long as I'm careful in my training. King Hell, your father is old, but I actually have to be subservient and coax a kid carefully. Gu Chaoyang heaved a heavy sigh. How Gu Chaoyang would train Qian Duo had nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. The current focus was the Palace of Nine Supremes' trade routes. They had basically unified the martial world without any rivals. This also meant that there was a lot of work to be done. Almost everyone was so busy that their feet did not even touch the ground. Qian Duo often felt overwhelmed and powerless. It was actually a good thing to have a helper like Gu Chaoyang, especially now that he only had authority and a nameless identity. He also had to be careful of Qian Duo. To Qian Duo, it was a joy. He would call Gu Chaoyang over every day to vent his frustrations when he had nothing better to do. As the war against the Qian family came to an end, the entire Palace of Nine Supremes plunged into another unprecedented bustle. In terms of combat strength, apart from some necessary security personnel, most of the other forces had withdrawn from the battlefield. The Palace of Nine Supremes' move allowed the other two noble families in the martial world to heave a sigh of relief. The Qian family was an established aristocratic family with a strong foundation. The market they had left behind was enough for the Palace of Nine Supremes to digest for a few years. These few years of buffer time was a rare breathing space for the two families. They still had to discuss their next step and confirm their strategy. The world of Jianghu became calm, and there were no waves. The training of the Palace of Nine Supremes' disciples was fully unleashed. Yun Yang, Dongfang Haoren, and the others had long arrived outside the legendary Supreme Heaven Pavilion. It was Yun Yang's first time here. Questions arose wherever he looked because all he could see was desolation. However, when he focused his gaze, it was a blur in front of him. Yun Yang's thoughts raced and he instantly deduced that there was a special barrier in front of him. A layer of translucent membrane separated the two sides. Suddenly, the weather changed. A bone-chilling wind howled. On the other side of the blurred field of vision, countless rays of golden light could be vaguely seen, spinning slowly. It was a spectacular sight. The place that's emitting the golden light is the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Dongfang Haoren pointed with his finger. Is it possible to remove this layer that blurs one's vision? Yun Yang asked curiously. It can't. Shiman Fanfu's gaze was solemn as he said, as long as the Supreme Heaven Pavilion doesn't move itself, even a Saint Pinnacle expert can't take a step into the blurry barrier. Yun Yang thought about it and said, oh. He had long predicted that the blurry barrier would be difficult to penetrate. Compared to the blurry barrier, he was more concerned about the spinning golden light on the other side. The golden light seemed to be filled with an indescribable aura. This is the ancient land of desolation. The weather here is different from other places. Beigong Lioli said, the 5 winds change in a day here. They can scrape one's soul, flesh, bones, blood, and deific consciousness. Even cultivators like us who have reached the level of saint dare not take it lightly. You've just arrived. Don't treat it as an ordinary wind and be careless. Yun Yang nodded in acknowledgement. Yun Yang was most proficient in the art of wind and cloud manifestation. Once he arrived, he realized that the wind was different. When the 3 lights shine together at night, it's when the Supreme Heaven Pavilion opens. These 3 lights refer to moonlight, starlight, and deathglow. They're not the usual 3 lights of the sun, moon, and star. Dongfang Haoren said, moonlight and starlight are no different from what we see normally. Only the deathglow has the effect of sinking one's soul. Although the strength of our souls has reached the pinnacle of this world and can't be shaken by ordinary forces, if we sink into it, our deific consciousness will waver and it will hinder the saint path. Yun Yang nodded in acknowledgement. How much longer do we need to wait? Yun Yang asked in a low voice. When it's about time, the Supreme Heaven Pavilion will release the welcoming light. The number of lights released means how many people can enter this time. It's clear at a glance. The main reason why each palace trains more than one son of saint is because the number of welcoming lights in each round of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion is different. I see. Yun Yang asked, have the sons of saints from your families arrived? Of course they've arrived a long time ago. Shiman Fanfu smiled faintly. Now, they're just waiting for our welcoming light to appear. Why don't I see them? I can't smell any life force at all. They're already hiding in the saint's barrier. It's only natural that we can't sense any life force. We're already at the level of saints, so of course we're not afraid of the light, but they can't. They'll only wait when the welcoming light appears. They'll step onto the welcoming light at once and enter it. Only then will they not be harmed and successfully pass the selection test. So we can only wait now? Yes, we can only wait, Dongfeng Haoren said. From the moment the Supreme Heaven Pavilion appears, there will be a swirling golden light. The welcoming light may appear at any time within a month's time. As for the light of guidance, it would only last for an hour. This is something we can't do anything about. We can only wait for it to appear passively. There's no way to predict it and there's no shortcut. Maybe the welcoming light will appear the day after the golden light appears. No one can say for sure. The three hegemons all had helpless looks on their faces as they spoke of this matter. The four of them walked quickly to the back of a barren hill. Going around the hill, Yun Yang realized that there were already 4 tents set up here. Outside each tent, there was a faint white glow. That was the saint's light that Dongfeng Haoren and the others had imbued. Only a saint-level power like this could resist the dangerous weather for a long time. Inside the tent were, of course, Lai Guangfeng, Feng Patian, Huan Wenyuan, and Lanting. Huan Wenyuan and Lanting were in the same tent, and in the last tent was Tian Fa's mystical beast, the Eagle King. Seeing Yun Yang's arrival, the Eagle King danced in joy and was extremely cordial. Lord Supreme Cloud, are you here to go in as well? Yun Yang was at a loss for words, not knowing how to answer. Looking at Feng Patian, then at Lai Guangfeng, then at the Orchid Pavilion's illusory Wenyuan, Yun Yang suddenly felt embarrassed. Why don't I not go in? Yun Yang said with a bitter face. It felt like he was snatching something from a child. Dongfeng Haoren and the other two laughed. It might be difficult to have a chance to make fun of a saint-level expert in the future. If they did not laugh now, when would they? No way. Why not? I have the Palace of 9 Supremes, and my development prospects are better than the 3 heavenly palaces combined. I can definitely go further than all of you. Yun Yang's face was flushed. With my current cultivation base, I can't even get past myself if I go in and fight with them for the legacy. I'm just thick-skinned, not shameless. Being thick-skinned or not doesn't apply to the current situation. It's fine if others don't go in, it's just a personal choice, but you have to go in. Dongfeng Haoren said seriously, if there's only one ray of welcoming light this time, it'll be you going in. If there's one more ray of welcoming light, it's none of your business who goes in and who doesn't. You have to go anyway. Why is that? Yun Yang really could not figure it out. I don't belong to the 3 heavenly palaces. Besides, the residence of 9 Supremes has its own legacy. So why would we need the Supreme Heaven Pavilion's welcoming? The reason is very simple. Up until now, in every Supreme Heavenly Pavilion selection, we have only received the inheritance of this heavenly palace. There should be a higher level inheritance above this, a higher level inheritance that we have yet to obtain. Dongfeng Haoren said seriously, we sincerely hope that you can get it, and only you have a chance of getting it. Throughout the history of Supreme Heaven Pavilion selections, the highest they can go is only the 3rd level. However, Supreme Heaven Pavilion has a total of 7 levels, and the difference is obvious. Going up to the 3rd level is already the limit of our 3 heavenly palaces. As long as we get the document of inheritance, we can inherit the 3 heavenly palaces. Dongfeng Haoren's face was slightly twisted. Back then, I used all my strength and tried to step into the 4th level, but I only got to the 8th step out of the 9 steps of the 4th level before I was kicked down. Kicked down? Yun Yang was stunned. There's actually someone in Supreme Heaven Pavilion? It's the transformation of spiritual energy into martial arts. Shiman Fan sighed. I didn't expect you to be 1 level higher than me. Humph, I'm also at the 8th level. Beigong Lioli was smug. Shiman Fan was helpless. Beigong, we've known each other for tens of thousands of years. But I never thought that you'd be so despicable. The 1st level can give you the benefit of strengthening your cultivation base, increasing your ability by 10%. The 2nd level can strengthen your deific consciousness, increasing your cultivation base by another 20%. The 3rd level can strengthen your soul, doubling your ability again. Dongfeng Haoren said slowly, so, whether you can break our record or not, whether you can get the legacy or not, the benefits you can get from entering are already great benefits. The candidates of the 3 heavenly palaces can only enter once in their lives. Yun Yang's curiosity was piqued. Chapter 1443. Even so, I still feel embarrassed. This is like a middle-aged man and a child going to a private school together. Although they both benefit and the adults benefit more, It still feels like an adult bullying a child. Yunyang sighed in self-deprecation. The three rulers guffawed. Just like what Shimin Huanyu had said earlier, the opportunity to make fun of a ruler was too rare. It had to be grasped as it would not come again. Of course, it was also because Yunyang's improvement was too fast. Whether or not there would be a chance to make fun of him in the future was another matter altogether. Whether or not he dared to do so was the key. No matter what kind of joke a ruler made, how many people dared to make fun of it? It was not because they could not, but because they did not dare to. On the other side, Feng Patian, Huan Wenyuan, Lanting, Lai Kuangfeng, and the others were also feeling complicated and indescribable. At the same time, they deeply felt that the other sons of God had really died too unjustly. Yunyang did not care about the position of the masters of the three heavenly palaces at all. It was the three rulers who fought for it, almost forcing it on him while crying and screaming. What was there to fight for? It was such a figure who wanted to make Yunyang an imaginary enemy. But in the end, they died in his hands one after another. Going against such a powerhouse, if you don't die, who will? Now, it seemed that they were wronged but not wronged at all. Yunyang had now ascended to the same level as the three rulers. Even if he was still not there, his realm was already synchronized. How could such a character be interested in the position of palace master of the three heavenly palaces? Moreover, the Palace of Nine Supremes now possessed a foundation and influence that surpassed that of the three heavenly palaces. Perhaps his overall ability was still inferior, but his potential had to be calculated the other way around. The former was like the rising sun, gradually flourishing, while the latter was like the sun that had passed the middle of the sky and would eventually set. It was only a matter of time before he truly surpassed them. Why would such a person come to fight for the position of palace lord with them? They were no longer on the same level. He even thought it was embarrassing to do the same thing as them and disdained to do it. If he had known that this would happen, why did so many people die? In the end, wasn't it because he didn't have enough confidence in himself? Huan Wenyuan, on the other hand, had another thought. When he first saw Yunyang, he thought that he was just an amateur who had popped out of nowhere. Although he had some luck, it was only a bit of luck. Now, it seemed that he could only look up to him. How could the word luck describe even a thousandth of it? If such a person was born in the three great heavenly palaces, would he be able to grow to such a level? Would he perish early in the battle for power? Yunyang was already a saint now. Although he and the others had broken through to the Saint Lord level thousands of years ago, it was difficult for them to progress further. All of them had stopped at the first level of the Saint Lord level. The gap between them was too great. No, come to think of it, how old was Yunyang? How long had he been cultivating? They looked about the same age as Yunyang, but that was only in appearance. In terms of actual age, how much older were they compared to Yunyang? Thinking of this, he could not help but sigh, and his morale became even lower. Should I fight with Lanting for the position of Palace Lord? Or go out to roam Jianghu? Or to kill demons? As time passed, the flowing golden light within the barrier grew brighter while the blurry feeling that the barrier gave off became fainter. Suddenly, amidst the howling wind, several beams of golden light shot out without warning. Dongfeng Haoren hollered, "The light of induction is here. Everyone, after entering, go and find your own opportunities. Don't fight each other and waste your energy." Shimin Fafu roared as well, "Yunyang, they are all juniors. Don't lose your dignity." Yunyang's nose twisted in anger. "What do you mean by that? Are you worried that I'll harm your disciples inside? Am I that kind of person?" Unbeknownst to him, the three rulers were not worried that Yunyang would harm them. Instead, they were worried that their juniors would do something inappropriate and offend Yunyang. After all, there was a grudge between them. The death of the three rulers' children was not far away, proving that Yunyang was not a magnanimous person. Once he struck, he would not show mercy. The golden light grew brighter and brighter. Almost in the blink of an eye, the golden light expanded abruptly and turned into golden bridges, solidifying before their eyes. The group confirmed the number again and again and fell into a state of shock. What was going on? Yunyang, the Eagle King, and the 4 from the 3 celestial palaces were a total of 6 people who planned to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, but 7 beams of golden light had appeared. Who would the remaining one be given to? It was impossible for Dongfeng Haoren and the other 2. However, other than the 3 of them, there were no other living people here. Right at this moment, a gray shadow suddenly flew over. This person was completely shrouded in a chilling wind, and when he stood still, he was already bathed in golden light. What he saw was a guest wearing a crown and a yellow robe. This was a king. Everyone looked again, only to see that the qi surrounding the person was very strange, as if they could see the appearance of the person clearly, but to say that they could not really see it clearly, it made them click their tongues in wonder. The newcomer chuckled and said, "The concourse of the underworld is here to join in as well." Lord Supreme Cloud. It's been a long time. Yun Yang's voice came from the golden light with a warm smile. Are you Lord Yama? The gray shadow laughed. Lord Supreme Cloud. You have a good memory. I am indeed Yama. Yun Yang's faint chuckle came again. I've been wondering when the concourse of the underworld would appear in this realm, whether it was necessary for you to come to the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection this time. I didn't expect you all to come anyway. King Yama's voice was heard again. Honestly, we didn't want to come. Perhaps the next Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection would be a better time for us to enter the realm. But we really need a base here in the Bound of Universe. The underworld is newly established and everything has to start from scratch. We really have nothing. We desperately need to be acknowledged by this heaven and earth. We're not like the Celestial Court. The Celestial Court has existed for a long time. Even when it was destroyed and rebuilt, its foundation still exists. We, on the other hand, have no foundation at all, so we could only resort to this trick. Yun Yang said, I see. But why are you here this time? King Yama wore a reluctant expression and said bitterly, I didn't come willingly. No one was willing to come either. I lost the finger-guessing game, so I had to come. Everyone who heard King Yama's last sentence instinctively rolled their eyes. This was a good thing that others could not even dream of, yet none of them were willing to come. The one who came in the end actually came because he lost the finger-guessing game. This was even more arrogant than Yun Yang, who did not want adults to bully children. Dongfeng Haoren, Shimin Fafu, and the others frowned deeply, their suspicions clouding their minds. Who was this person? What King Yama? What organization did this person belong to? Why did such an organization pop up out of nowhere? Their tone was so arrogant, and their target was actually the same level as the 3 heavenly palaces. Moreover, this fellow, why did he not look like a living person? However, he did not look like a dead person, much less a spirit. What was going on? The 3 rulers' vision was incomparable to an ordinary person's. They had instantly noticed the peculiarity of King Yama's concourse of the underworld's cultivation method. The chilly wind, the gloomy clouds, and the air that obscured one's vision. It was not an ordinary cultivation method. How could they not be suspicious? Yun Yang obviously knew about these questions, but why had he never mentioned them? For hundreds of thousands of years, there had only been 3 heavenly palaces and at most, Tian Fa, who were qualified to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection. No other sects were qualified. It was only when the residence of 9 Supremes rose and became the Palace of 9 Supremes, and when Yun Yang became a saint and attained the level of a ruler that the Palace of 9 Supremes truly became another organization that was qualified to participate in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection. How could another one suddenly appear? Yun Yang said, Sai, your cultivation methods are unique. Although they point to the path of Tao, there's another end to them. If you really continue on this path, I'm afraid you won't be able to return to the mortal realm anymore. I know that my brothers have long known this and no longer have any doubts. But do you have any regrets? I can help. King Yenlua's voice grew deeper. Lord Supreme Cloud is still wise and far-sighted. After this selection, we'll really... Sai, what's the point of saying all that? Brother Yun, we have you and your sect in the mortal realm anyway. If we have any needs, we'll naturally come to you. We won't hold back. Yun Yang was beaming. Well said, it's good that you won't hold back. I have about 10 Chiavine here. Remember to bring them back for your brothers when you return. Chiavine? King Yenluo exclaimed in delight. Great. That's great. Brother Yun, how did you know that we're lacking this now? Do you have any more? How many more? We really need this. This fellow was really blunt. Yun Yang laughed without feeling offended and said, I'll try my best to gather them. However, this is something that the world of the living doesn't have, and it's even more taboo. I think we can only get 15 at most. Any more and it'll be impossible. 15? That's more than enough. King Yenluo guffawed, obviously overjoyed. We couldn't control it for now. But with this Qi of Yin at most a year later. You know. Yun Yang's expression was one of understanding. Of course, ha ha, but Tianqian Continent, old Marshal Qiu, old Mistress Shangguan, old Grand Commandant Feng. You all know them. King Yenluo guffawed. I didn't hear anything. What did you say just now? I didn't say anything. Yun Yang chortled, overjoyed. Dongfeng Haoren was dumbfounded. What did they say? I didn't understand a single word. Shiman Haoren repeated, yes, I heard every word and understood them, but I don't know what they meant. Beigong Lioli was speechless. I thought both of you knew and waited for you to explain. In the end, both of you farted one after another. It's so smelly, it's all bullshit tea. They seem to have some sort of shady deal? I think so too, but I don't understand. At this moment, the golden light on the other side surged again. The golden bridges beneath everyone's feet solidified, revealing a plaque on each bridge. Lai Kuangfeng was the first to move, writing on the plaque, East Celestial Palace, Lai Kuangfeng. With the last stroke, the 7 words suddenly glowed with a dazzling golden light. Then, Lai Kuangfeng disappeared along with the plaque. Western Heaven Holy Palace, Feng Patian. Northern Wasteland Demonic Palace, Mirage Abyss. Northern Wasteland Demonic Palace, Lanting. Tian Fa Holy Land, Ing Li. The man in gray, King Yenluo, wrote, Concourse of the Underworld, Yama. Yun Yang thought about it and wrote, Yun Yang. He only wrote a name but did not fill in the Palace of 9 Supremes. Still, the golden light shone brightly and disappeared. When the 7 people were gone, the golden bridge retracted abruptly and disappeared with a swoosh, as if it had never existed. The golden light that was still spinning dimmed as well. Everything went smoothly, and everyone went in. Only then did Dongfeng Haoren turn his head in confusion. There are strange things every year, but not as many as this year. This old man has never seen such a strange thing in his life. With Yun Yang as an anomaly, everything is strange. What I'm more concerned about is that man in gray. What kind of organization is that King Yenluo and Concourse of the Underworld? Yun Yang seems to be very serious about it, and he's trying to befriend them. It's definitely extraordinary. Why do you think Yun Yang went in directly without writing his sect? When did that Concourse of the Underworld come out? They have the qualification to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, but I've never heard of them before. This is unbelievable. The 3 of them looked at each other, countless questions stuck in their chests, almost suffocating them to the point of illness. The 3 of them had always boasted that they were experts who had everything in the world under their control. Who would have thought that so many things that they did not know about would happen today? It was truly strange. Only 3,700 words today. 300 left to be filled tomorrow. GT. Chapter 1445. Everyone who entered the Supreme Heaven Pavilion had different experiences and each had their own future. Yun Yang felt his vision blur before he found himself in a strange space. As he looked around, Yun Yang saw countless stars shining densely above his head, but there was only a weak light in front of him. He could barely see, but when he stretched out his hand, he could not see his fingers. It was so dark that he could not even see his own fingers. However, he could feel a sense of stability beneath his feet. At this moment and place, the power of his deific consciousness had been completely blocked. Even Yun Yang's saint-level deific consciousness was completely suppressed and rendered useless. His cultivation base and mystical qi were still surging and flowing, but he could not use any of it at all. Fortunately, his martial artist's intuition was still there. Yun Yang could clearly feel that his surroundings were empty, as if no one else was nearby. It looks like everyone won't gather together after coming in, but will go their own way? Why would Dongfeng Haoren and the rest be worried that I would harm their disciples? At this moment, a scream came from afar, but the sound was distant, as if it came from a different time and space. That sounds like the sound of Lai Kuangfeng? Yun Yang was stunned. What had he encountered? Why hadn't he encountered anything? As he pondered, the faint light in front of him changed subtly. Looking towards the direction of the light, a small path appeared, and the other end of the path seemed to be a flight of stairs. Was that a flight of stairs? Did they not say that the way to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion was to go up the stairs step by step? Was that the way? Yun-yang did not doubt it and walked towards the light. He had only taken 2 steps when a gust of wind suddenly blew. 2 silhouettes formed from spiritual fog appeared on both sides of him, attacking him with a strong gust of wind. Although Yun-yang had mystical chi that was at the pinnacle of this world and his internal breath was surging, he was restricted by the current atmosphere and could not use it. He could only defend himself against the attack. Bam, bam, bam. Punches, kicks, palms and legs rained down on Yun-yang like raindrops. Yun-yang frowned, but his frown soon relaxed. What? They could not break through his defense at all. Yun-yang knew that he would lose if he continued to defend, so he did not slow down. Braving the rain-like blows, he strode forward. Bang 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 bang. Yun-yang stood firm like a mountain as he strode forward. With each step he took, the attacking shadows on both sides would dissipate abruptly, turning into spiritual fog that melted into Yun-yang's body. About a dozen steps forward, Yun-yang had already come to the front of the first step. It was also after arriving at this position that Yun-yang could clearly feel that his cultivation base had increased by 10% in this short stretch of road. Do not underestimate a mere 10% improvement. Any cultivator who improved their cultivation base by 10% was no different from being reborn, as if they were a completely different person. Furthermore, Yun-yang had now advanced to the saint level. 10% of a saint cultivator's cultivation base was equivalent to the full cultivation base of a third-level saint lord. He had only walked a few dozen steps in total, yet he had such a huge improvement. It was not just a miracle, it was simply a miracle. A sign more miraculous than a miracle. If it wasn't a miracle, then what was it? Walking to the front of the steps, Yun-yang, who realized his improvement, felt a little regretful. Why did he not walk slower? Why did he take such big strides? Fortunately, this miracle was far from the end. According to Dongfang Haoren and the others, there were still a few more sections and levels to go. Yun-yang continued his journey forward, lifting his foot gently to step on the first step. Just as his foot touched the ground, he felt a piercing pain at the bottom of his foot. It felt like there were hundreds and thousands of needles piercing into his bones. The pain was excruciating and penetrated deep into his bones. Yun-yang sucked in a deep breath. Without changing his original intention, he stepped on the step without hesitation, firm and steady. When both his feet landed on the first step at the same time, the pain of his feet being pierced by thousands of needles multiplied. The excruciating pain that penetrated deep into his bones could no longer be described. It was as if his soul was convulsing. His heart was in turmoil, but Yun-yang's expression did not change. He continued to walk up step by step without hesitation, taking big strides forward steadily and steadily. Yun-yang climbed up the 9 steps steadily. Not only did his expression change, even his gaze did not change. At the same time, Lai Guangfeng and the others were either in the passageway before the stairs or on the stairs. Their screams rose and fell. It wasn't that they wanted to lose their composure, it was just that it was too painful. It was so painful that they couldn't bear it at all. Screaming was the only effective way for them to vent or reduce their own sensations. What they needed right now wasn't to block it, but to persevere. Furthermore, they had only passed the first step. With each step they went up, the pain would only intensify. Mountains of blades and seas of fire came one after another, and they could not use any cultivation base to resist the pain. They had to endure it with their bodies. Was this the path that a human should take? Not only them, but King Yama was also cursing on the other side of the stairs. F***ck, I'm a soul without a physical body now. Physical attacks should be completely useless against me, but what's the feeling of my soul being pierced like this? In spite of this, King Yama's situation was obviously much better than the other 4. He had already reached the 7th level and was about to go up. Other than Yun-yang, the one who had the easiest time was not King Yama, but the Eagle King. The Eagle King was a mystical beast, so his physical body was much stronger than a human's. Now that he had transformed into his true form, the form of an eagle, his resistance was even stronger. Although he could not spread his wings and soar, the area that his talons had to bear was much smaller than the others, so the pain he had to endure was naturally reduced. One of Yun-yang's feet was already on the 9th step. He could already see the boundless fog of the 2nd level. However, just as his other foot was about to leave the 9th step, there was a sudden rumble from above. A gigantic foot was coming towards him. Yun-yang was already prepared for this. Both his hands were placed in front of his eyes, blocking the incoming force. Although his body could not help but lean back, both his feet had still stepped into the second level. Then, his body was suspended in the air for a moment before he turned back bit by bit. Yun-yang thought to himself that it was a close shave. If it were not for Dongfang Haoren's warning, he might have failed miserably just now and lost the selection. Stepping onto the second level and taking his first step, there were indeed spiritual fog assassins coming at him from both sides. The sounds of attacks rang again, but he was still passively receiving the attacks without being able to retaliate. In spite of this, Yun-yang deliberately slowed down his pace. He allowed the spiritual fog assassins to attack him. Such a state of slowing down was like, I've always lifted my foot, but I have to take a long time before I can land my foot. I'm only moving bit by bit. At most, I'm just a little slower. I'll let you guys hit me all you want. Then, Yun-yang realized that the light in the second level was much brighter, causing the surroundings to appear hazy. It was a stark contrast to the time when he could not even see his own fingers in front of him. He could even see white spots protruding from the ground at the bottom of the steps in front of him. Other than the path that was illuminated by the light, the surroundings were extremely empty. There was no end in sight. It was as if there were 9 steps slanted eerily on a boundless plain, connecting to another space. Just as Yun-yang's first step was about to land on the ground, the Eagle King was the first to pop his head out from the other side. He was at the same level as Yun-yang. Once he appeared, he cried out, "It hurts so much." Then, he plopped down on the ground and reverted to his human form, massaging his feet without any intention of moving forward. A moment later, King Yen-luo jumped up. No wonder they refused to come. They have to suffer like this. It's tormenting me to death. He then began to rub his feet as well, all over his body, everywhere. I feel like I'm being dismembered. Half a cup of tea's time later, Lai Guangfeng and the others popped their heads out as well, their lips pale and their faces pale. They were shivering from head to toe as they rubbed their bodies to activate their blood vessels, just like Ying Yan and Yun-yang. When they finally caught their breaths and looked at Yun-yang who was being beaten up, their faces were filled with gloating and even a tinge of relief. We thought you were so awesome. You should have gone to the third level by now, but you're still dawdling here. Look at your movements. You can't even take a step forward after a long time. It's the textbook version of difficulty in taking a step forward. When the few of them felt that they had rested enough and began to move forward against the beating, Yun-yang had only taken his 4th step. After a while, Huan Wenyuan and the others could not help but feel motivated when they saw that Yun-yang was still stuck in the initial stage of difficulty. There was only 1 flight of steps leading up on the second level. Some were near while others were far away, and Yun-yang was right in the middle. Seeing that Yun-yang seemed to be at a disadvantage, the few of them gathered their strength and pushed forward bravely against the beating. Not long after, they rushed to Yun-yang's front. Among them, Huan Wenyuan was the furthest in front. He was the first to step on the end of the flight of steps, at the protruding spot that was glowing white on the ground. Just as Huan Wenyuan touched the protruding spot, he suddenly slipped and fell to the ground. Then, many spirit fog men swarmed up from the side, punching and kicking even more ferociously than before. Huan Wenyuan was sent flying from the ground. As he floated in the air, he was beaten up along the way. Hoo. He was beaten all the way back. Along the way back, Huan Wenyuan's screams were heart-wrenching and heart-wrenching. It was truly a tragic sight. This round of beatings continued until he arrived at the entrance of the staircase on the 1st floor before finally stopping. As soon as he arrived there, the numerous spirit mistmen that had attacked him in groups had suddenly vanished, and they transformed back into dense mist. However, Huan Wenyuan was already bruised and swollen, no longer in human form. During this period of time, the spiritual fog that had seeped into his body during the journey to the second level had all come out. It was unknown whether it was forcefully extracted or stripped away for some other reason. But in the end, it was equivalent to being beaten up for nothing. Huan Wenyuan was moaning on the ground. His eyes were so swollen that there was only a slit left. His entire body looked like it had been cut by 1,000 knives. His strong and straight body swelled up at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, he had become a big fat man. The others were stunned when they saw the change. They were so frightened that they did not dare to take another step forward. Brother Huan, Lai Guangfeng's position was also relatively close to the white protruding point. Seeing Huan Wenyuan's miserable state, he was so frightened that he retracted his foot. However, as he retracted his foot, The spiritual fog energy that he had absorbed was reduced by a third, and it came out of his body with a whoosh. However, he did not care about this at this moment. He asked in a deep voice, "Brother Huan, what's the situation?" Huan Wenyuan groaned and said while lying on the ground, "That protruding stone is very strange. Not only is it slippery, but it also has an abnormally strong rotational force. The harder you step on it, the harder it is to stand firmly." Hearing this, the few of them immediately became even more cautious. The wind-piercing sky arrow, who was the closest, had no choice but to shoot. His left foot stabilized his body with 1,000 kilograms drop, and his right foot tentatively stepped on it. Everyone watched the subsequent development attentively. They obviously wanted to see the clues and make sure that they could succeed in one fell swoop when they stepped on it. At the right time, Feng Potion's right foot touched the white light like a dragonfly skimming on the water. Then, Feng Potion's whole body spun in the air like a top. After spinning a dozen or so times, his whole body prostrated on the ground, face down. This was the classic famous technique, dog gnawing style. Feng Patian had just let out a muffled groan when he was already sent flying by the group of spirit mist people. As he was beaten, the spiritual fog energy that his body had absorbed was also beaten out. Just like Huan Wenyuan, Feng Patian was beaten back to the staircase like a kite with its string cut. Following in Huan Wenyuan's footsteps, his entire body was swollen like a big fatty. Everyone was dumbstruck and speechless. "What's going on?" Eagle King asked loudly. "The lighter the force, the greater the rebound and slip force." Feng Patian muttered. His words were unclear. Most likely, all his teeth had been beaten out, so he really couldn't speak clearly. Hearing this, everyone was completely stunned. It didn't work to step on it, and it didn't work to touch it lightly either. What was he supposed to do? Next, Lai Guangfeng and Lan Ting tested it separately, but they were also beaten back in an instant. The four of them sprawled on the ground, their bodies swollen. They looked at each other. Back then, their master and the others had even gone up to the third level. Could it be that they could only stop at the second level? However, this slippery stone, how could they pass it? For a time, no one dared to move rashly, and the sounds of beating couldn't help but grow louder. The few of them fell into the awkward situation of being beaten on the spot, unable to move an inch. However, Lan Ting and the others would rather be beaten than move forward. All of them turned to look at Yun Yang. King Yen Luo chuckled. His body was beaten until the fog was seeping out, but he still chuckled and said, "Lord Supreme Cloud, why don't you try it first? Help us open the way?" Yun Yang rolled his eyes. "Why don't you let me try it first when there's something good?" King Yen Luo chuckled. "You're strong, how can we compare to you? Not just me, these young brothers here are also waiting for you to explore the way for us. After all, you're this." As he spoke, he gave a thumbs up. Lan Ting took the opportunity to flatter Yun Yang. "Lord Supreme Cloud, before we came in, Master has repeatedly instructed that everything should be decided by Lord Supreme Cloud. This young one will be eternally grateful if Lord Supreme Cloud can bear the burden." "Thank you, Lord Supreme Cloud," the others said in unison. "All right, I'll go and try now." Yun Yang did not waste any more time. Instead, he picked up his pace and walked over while enduring the beating of the spirit fog man. Before this drastic change in attitude, he strode forward with large strides, his body unwavering. The spirit fog man's beatings did not seem to affect him at all. Bam, bam, bam. Yun Yang sprinted all the way and reached the end of the stairs in no time. One more step and he would be at the glowing white stone. Everyone's eyes were glued to him. Chapter 1446. At this moment, everyone looked nervous as they stared at Yun Yang without blinking. If Yun Yang was unable to do anything to Baitudian, then all of them would probably perish here. The honor selection this time would be like a broken halberd sinking into the sand, ending prematurely. Yun Yang's expression was still indifferent as he said as he walked, "Although this place is eerie and everything is unexpected, it's not impossible to break through. Didn't your masters pass through here as well? Since they could pass through, it means that there's a way. It's just that you haven't thought of it yet. If I'm not mistaken, the rock's rotation force isn't because of its slippery appearance, but because it's constantly rotating at a high speed. When you're in an unfamiliar place and you know that the object in front of you is the key to the test. I'm really curious. Why don't all of you test it first? The simplest way is to have your feet on the ground and touch it with your hands. Is it that difficult? As Yun-yang spoke, he straightened his legs like a pine tree and bent down to touch the glowing white protrusion with his hand. As soon as he touched it, a rapidly rotating force came, but Yun-yang, who was already prepared, had already retracted his hand at once. He was not being tested at all. My idea is correct. The rock spins on its own and at an extremely fast speed. There are a total of 27 rocks here, surrounding this first step. I'm guessing that the other rocks' rotation directions are very likely to be completely different. He extended his hand again to touch the other glowing white rocks. Touching the nearest 4 to 5 rocks, he said. Up until now, all the rocks I've touched have been rotating at a high speed. 2 adjacent rocks are rotating in the opposite direction. The speed of these rocks' rotation is about the same. They can spin hundreds and thousands of times in an instant. Even if you can handle one, it's inevitable that you'll lose your balance when it comes to the second. However, if you can make use of the counterforce, there'll be other opportunities. Yun-yang extended both his hands at the same time and pressed them against the 2 rocks next to each other, saying faintly, "Like this, I don't even need to exert much strength to stop these 2 rocks from spinning. I only need to make sure that the rocks themselves are smooth." Yun-yang shook his head speechlessly and said, "I don't know how the 3 heavenly palaces teach their disciples, but if it were the palace of 9 Supreme's disciples, they might not be able to pass this stair easily, but at least 7 or 8 out of 10 of them would pass safely after testing it out. This little bit of caution and adaptability is really not enough." The personal disciples of the 3 hegemons were all flushed red to the ears. They were so ashamed that they couldn't speak. It was too embarrassing. Yun-yang was right. The logic was extremely simple. In such a strange place, he really had to be careful. Just because he couldn't use his mental strength didn't mean that he was blind and deaf. He could see, hear, and touch anything, right? However, he and the others had stepped on it without any hesitation. In this test, stepping on it with one's feet and touching it with one's hands were obviously 2 different choices. No matter how confident one was, when one's foot left the ground, one's center of gravity would definitely be lost. At this point, one's body would be in the most precarious position. How could one not fall into the trap that the seniors had purposely set up to target this? Yun-yang stood up and smiled faintly. He smiled faintly. Being acquainted with the palace lords of the 3 great heavenly palaces, he could be said to be giving advice to their disciples. No matter what, it was more than enough. Then, Yun-yang leaped up lightly and landed on the 2 rocks next to each other. The 2 rocks that were spinning at high speed stopped spinning immediately due to the counteracting force, leaving only the smooth surface of the rocks. How could they do anything to Yun-yang? After Yun-yang stood firmly, he quickly leaped again, landing on the 2 rocks at the same time. With 3 consecutive leaps, he was already in front of the stairs. In the next moment, Yun-yang's feet were already on the first step of the stairs that would leave this floor. Just as Yun-yang leaped up, he suddenly felt a piercing pain coming from both his feet at the same time, like thousands of steel needles stabbing into them. At the same time, a ray of light shot into his Bai-Hui acupoint from the top of his head. It was a ray of starlight glowing in his head, flowing down his meridians in a manner that could still be seen clearly from an outsider's point of view. This scene was far more than just a spectacular sight, it was simply horrifying and shocking to the eyes. At that moment, Yun-yang felt as if his legs had turned into minced meat, unable to stand straight. The golden light above his head felt as if it was about to split his body into 2 halves. He gritted his teeth and did not make a sound, maintaining his clarity of mind to deal with it calmly. However, the pain that was beyond his limits had caused his face to pale. After a while, the starlight flowed freely in Yun-yang's meridians like a red-hot iron bar. From his head down, through his neck, shoulders, and all the way down, through his waist and right thigh, all the way to the tip of his right toe before disappearing. Throughout the process, Yun-yang could not move at all and could only endure it passively. The feeling was even more excruciating than being sliced into pieces. He endured it with all his might, trying his best to maintain a straight face. He did not even frown, but he was already drenched in sweat, drenching his clothes. Fortunately, the excruciating pain that was beyond his own limits only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. Yun-yang, who was no longer in pain, looked like he had been reborn. He exhaled deeply, his breath tinged with a faint red hue. He did not move but said faintly, "The training you have to endure here is far more intense than before. Every step you take requires extreme agony. It's an agony that surpasses the cycle of life and death. Quit if you can't bear it. If you force yourself, it'll damage your will severely. The loss outweighs the gain. Yun-yang did not stop after he finished speaking. He lifted his left foot and took a steady step forward, ignoring the pain that felt like needles pricking his foot. His right foot did not stop at the same time as it went up to a higher step. At the same time, another ray of starlight arrived at the same time. It was still from above, embedded into the skull from the Bai Hui acupoint, and traveled down along the meridians. However, this time, the route of the meridians was different from the previous one. This time the endpoint was the second toe of the right foot, and then it disappeared just like the previous one. Although Yun-yang was mentally prepared and had the previous experience, he was still sweating profusely. There was a faint stench mixed in with the sweat. Yun-yang was surprised. He had had many fortuitous encounters in the past. His physical body, blood, and meridians had been reborn many times, and he had recently advanced to the level of a saint. His current physical body might not be flawless, but it should at least be free of impurities. How could his sweat have such a smell? Unless the golden starlight had something else to it that enhanced his physical body and improved it further. As Yun-yang's thoughts raced, he calmed himself down to sense his own condition. He was shocked to find that the two meridians that had experienced the flow of starlight had undergone a subtle change. Other than becoming tougher than before, there was a faint glimmer of golden light in the meridians, but nothing more could be seen when he looked within himself. In spite of this, Yun-yang still came to a shocking conclusion. His meridians were at least twice as tough as before. They were at least twice as tough as before. Such an improvement was more than shocking. It was simply unheard of and unbelievable. Yun-yang stepped onto the higher third step in silence. This time, two rays of golden light shone down at the same time. The meridians from his head to the third and fourth toes of his right foot were opened up one after another. Just like that, Yun-yang walked up one step at a time without stopping, determined and unwavering. In the end, from the top of his head to his toes, and even his facial features, eyes, ears, nostrils, and even his tailbone, all the blind spots and sharp points on his body, the golden starlight passed through them. When he stood on the third step, Yun-yang felt like he had walked through the 18 levels of hell, 10 times, or even 100 times. Just as Yun-yang exhaled, he could not help chuckling softly and said, "After going through this ordeal, I believe that I can get through the cruelest punishment in this world with a smile. Even if my soul disintegrates, my expression won't change so easily." Down below, Huan Wenyuan and the others were all pale as they stared at Yun-yang in awe. Listening to Yun-yang's introductions and imparting his experiences to them, how could they not know that this was Yun-yang's intention? There was no need for Yun-yang to do so. Even if the Temple of Nine Supremes and the three celestial palaces were doing business, there was still a hidden competition in the long run. Yun-yang's detailed introduction was equivalent to pointing out a clear path for them. They told themselves that as long as they could endure it, they would be able to move forward. There would be no obstacles. The result of such an approach would only benefit them and the three celestial palaces greatly. It was a disguised form of aiding the enemy. Everyone understood this and could not help but feel grateful. The four of them bowed in gratitude. "Thank you, Senior Uncle Yun, for your guidance." Before this, they had still addressed him as Lord Supreme Cloud. But now, they were willing to call him Senior Uncle Yun. Obviously, they had acknowledged Yun-yang's position as being on par with the lords of the three celestial palaces. Yun-yang waved his hand and with a flash of his body. He did not waste any more words, nor did he linger. He moved forward in the third level without further ado. Then, the sound of flesh being beaten came from above, but it only lasted for 2 moments before it was no longer heard. Then on the second level, King Yenluo's gray shadow flashed and was the first to stand on the first 2 protruding rocks. Following Yun-yang's demonstration, he did not slip and reached the end easily. King Yenluo had made up his mind that when he stepped on those few steps, he would follow Yun-yang's example and not make a single sound. When he soared again, both his feet flew up and landed on the first step. Then a heart-wrenching scream escaped King Yenluo's mouth uncontrollably, piercing to the ears. The cry was so loud and tragic that it caused the others, including the Eagle King, to shiver uncontrollably. This scream was not only mournful, but it also lasted for a long time. It lasted until the golden light came out from his toes. Only then did King Yenluo's scream come to an end. Following that, he panted heavily. His pale face that was hidden in the gray fog could be seen. Huan Wenyuan shuddered again when he saw this. Exchanging glances with the others, they all saw the fear in each other's eyes. To be able to come this far, which one of them was not the cream of the crop? Which one of them was not a ruthless character who would not frown even if they were attacked? Being highly skilled, they might occasionally be careless, but when it came to individual willpower, it was always commendable. Yun Yang had been drenched in sweat as he walked down the stairs just now. It was obvious to everyone that the process must have been excruciating, but Yun Yang had not made a single sound. Huan Wenyuan and the others felt that even if the process was excruciating, they could still persevere. Even if they were not as good as Yun Yang, it would not be too difficult. However, when they heard King Yenluo's scream just now, their hearts were in their throats. What kind of pain could make a strong person like King Yenluo, a king, cry out so melodiously? Then, they saw King Yenluo suddenly jump up to the second level. At that moment, that familiar screech rang out uncontrollably once more. It was still a long and continuous sound. The four men and the eagle's faces turned pale. F***ck, even after experiencing it for the first time, I still can't bear it. This pain is extraordinary. It's terrifying. What they did not know was that King Yenluo was also angry at himself. He was not prepared for the first level, so he could only cry out, but he could not cry out for the second level. Who would have thought that just as he went up, before his brain could react, his mouth had already cried out involuntarily. In the end, he simply gave up. Since he had already lost all face, he could cry out if he wanted to. At least he had another channel to vent his pain. It had to be said that once a person's sense of shame was gone, he could no longer keep his mouth shut. He could do anything he wanted. When he reached the third and fourth level, King Yenluo could no longer restrain himself. He let out a full-throated cry. Ah! The cries became more and more melodious, lingering for 3 days, still echoing endlessly. At this time, Yun Yang's scolding voice came from above. F***ck. What are you screaming for? Those who know that you're challenging the levels, those who don't would think that you're in a brothel. Cough, cough. His words made Lanting and the others burst out in laughter. King Yenluo's dark face was flushed red, which was a sight to behold. Yun Yang, who was on the third level, walked forward step by step. What he had to endure now was still the familiar mobbing routine. However, the force of the mobbing was more than twice as strong as it was in the 2 levels below. Yun Yang could clearly feel that his cultivation base had increased by another 10% after going through the third level's ganging up. In addition, this was a full 10% increase after going through the first level. The increased mystical chi and spiritual power resonated with the flowing spiritual fog, surging endlessly like a tsunami. If I can get to the 5th level, I might be on par with Dongfeng Haoren and the others after I leave with such a speed of advancement, Yun Yang calculated in his heart. His eyes were glowing as he looked at the stairs from the 3rd to the 4th level. I wonder who has such godly means to build this exalted heaven pavilion here. The word, exalted, truly lives up to its name. The 2 words heaven pavilion complement each other as well, surpassing this world and standing at a strategically advantageous position. As he pondered, he could not help thinking about the position of exalted heaven in the cultivation base level. Yun Yang had another epiphany. Exalted heaven in mystical chi perhaps refers to the status of a human emperor. Although they have the title of exalted heaven, they can only reign supreme in the human realm. They are the exalted heaven in the human realm. Above the exalted heaven is the venerable realm. To the human realm, the venerable realm is to transcend the mundane and become a figure of myth, legend, or even deity. However, in the path of cultivation, it is only the starting point of the 2nd stage. Beyond that, it is to transcend the mundane and enter sainthood. To become a saint, there is naturally a king among the saints, the king among the kings. Hence, there are saint kings and saint emperors. Then, the level of saint venerable is another starting point that has broken away from the levels. As for the saint, it is another extreme, the pinnacle of this world, the saint. To ascend to heaven, the saint must first be a person. If my guess is correct, the path of a higher level should be another starting point with the saint. Yun Yang could not help but feel even more impressed as his imagination ran wild. The names of the martial arts levels were not just a name, but they also contained great wisdom. Chapter 1447. Yun Yang did not know if this was the only setup of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Anyway, the 3rd level's mystical chi infusion was no different from before. Other than that, There were no other tricks. Yun Yang could not help but shift his attention to the third-level staircase. According to Dongfeng Haoren and the others, they had all fallen at the end of this staircase. They had all been kicked down when they were about to ascend to a higher level. The Heaven Pavilion selection had ended abruptly. Did this mean that from the fourth level onwards, there was no longer a chance of failure? It was no longer like before where there was a chance to try again even if there was an occasional mistake? That would be too much of a risk. Yun Yang stared at the third-level staircase. It looked quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary about it. He could not see any setup at all. Following the principle of being cautious, Yun Yang extended his hand to touch it carefully, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. This made Yun Yang even more vigilant. Yun Yang took a few steps back cautiously, allowing the spirit fog being who had stopped attacking to continue hitting him. He also absorbed the spiritual fog and adjusted his breathing to ensure that he was in the most perfect state so that he could handle any unforeseen circumstances. Only then did he step onto the fourth level. Yun Yang had never been a reckless person. He knew very well that even the slightest flaw in his soul or body could affect the overall situation. This was the logic of a lion using its full strength to catch a rabbit. On the staircase of the third floor, there were still screams that sounded like the wails of ghosts and the howls of gods. King Yen Luo had finally reached the top. The Yin mist had dissipated, and his entire body was slumped to the ground, as if he had already turned into a puddle of mud. No matter how the spirit mist figure hit him, he could only gasp for breath, motionless as he absorbed the spiritual energy of the third floor. The next to ascend was the Eagle King. The Eagle King's cry was different from King Yama's. The Eagle King let out a long cry towards the end, sounding even more terrifying than the cuckoo's cries of blood. When it came to Lanting and the others, there were even more miserable cries of every description. Some were soft, some were coarse, some were thick, some were thick, some were soft, some were thick, some were soft, some were like ghosts crying and gods howling. There was not a single one of them. In the end, all of them collapsed on the ground like a puddle of mud without exception, not moving for a long time. Among them, the Eagle King was the most shameless. He directly revealed his true form, lying on the ground in the form of an eagle. His wings were drooping, and his body was drenched in sweat. He looked like an old hen that was about to shed its feathers. It took a long time for the group to catch their breaths and step forward to thank Yun Yang. "Thank you, Senior Uncle Yun, for your insightful insight and your earnest guidance." Yun Yang nodded but did not speak again. He needed to maintain himself in his best and most complete state right now. Any nonsense could cause his condition to be incomplete and cause him to fail again. After resting, Lai Guangfeng was the first to attempt to ascend the stairs to the fourth floor. He didn't really think that he would be able to ascend it, but it was always good to try. There was nothing unusual about the first 6 floors in this attempt. The process was similar to the previous ones. Although it was excruciatingly painful, with the previous experience, he could grit his teeth and endure it. However, when he reached the 7th floor, a silhouette suddenly appeared. A large foot stomped down with a force that seemed to cover the heaven and earth. Lai Guangfeng cried out loudly as his body was flung away and fell to the ground. Lai Guangfeng landed on the ground of the 3rd floor with a loud boom. The moment he landed on the ground, countless rays of starlight lit up in the air, forming a complicated diagram that landed on his forehead, forming a mark. Then, Lai Guangfeng's silhouette suddenly vanished from the 3rd floor of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Yun Yang understood what had happened when he saw this. His judgment of the 4th floor setup was mostly correct. Although Lai Guangfeng had failed, he had already achieved an achievement similar to the current Palace Lord of the East Celestial Palace, Dongfeng Haoren. The mark was proof that he had obtained the qualification to inherit the East Celestial Palace. Then, this child would be the Palace Lord after Dongfeng Haoren. The next to try was Feng Patian. He was also kicked away in the 7th floor. Although he had learned his lesson from Lai Guangfeng's mistake and was already on guard against the kick, he was still unable to resist it despite his full strength and fell to the ground. However, he had also obtained the qualification to inherit the West Celestial Palace just like Lai Guangfeng. After that, Huan Wenyuan and Lanting also failed to pass the 7th floor and were kicked away one after another. Neither of them disappeared immediately. After the stars shone in the air for a while, they made their final choice and the mark fell on Lanting's forehead. Huan Wenyuan laughed and said, "Congratulations, junior brother." He was not the least bit jealous. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. Huan Wenyuan had once been very passionate about the position of Palace Lord, but he was even more passionate about strength. When he saw Yun Yang's current achievements, he already had a vague idea in his heart. If he could reach Yun Yang's achievements, even if he did not become Palace Lord, what else could he do? One had to know that after becoming Palace Lord, there would be all sorts of things to do in the future, and his cultivation might not be fast. Now was the time for him to improve by leaps and bounds. Perhaps letting Lanting become Palace Lord was the best choice. Thank you, senior brother. Lanting obviously understood. Huan Wenyuan's congratulation deepened Lanting's feelings. From now on there would be no more competition. As soon as they finished speaking, the senior and junior brothers disappeared like Lai Guangfeng and Lanting Patian. They had obviously been sent out. The Hawk King was slightly stronger than the direct disciples of the three rulers. He had been kicked away on the 8th step. He had transformed into the form of a hawk and used an extreme speed movement technique to successfully avoid that tyrannical kick. However, the attack on the 8th step was a level higher, and the range of the attack was even greater. He had no way to display his extreme speed. Just like Huan Wenyuan and the others, he fell to the ground. After obtaining the imprint, he also disappeared. However, the starlight mark he obtained was a little brighter than Lai Guangfeng and the others. He must have obtained more benefits. At this point, only Yun Yang and King Yama were left in the vast sovereign space. It was not that the two of them did not have the opportunity to rush up earlier, but they had deliberately stayed behind. Everyone could see that there was nothing special about the 4th step that was worth paying attention to. What they needed to pay attention to was the sudden attack of the giant foot. You first or I? King Yama looked at Yun Yang. Yun Yang said, I'll go first. Thank you, King Yama said. Yun Yang's attempt was equivalent to giving King Yama more experience. King Yama knew that if there was someone who could go up to the sovereign selection, it would be Yun Yang. Now that he had allowed Yun Yang to go up, it was no different than Yun Yang passing on a wave of successful experience to him. This was a huge favor. When Yun Yang stepped onto the 4th step, he did not feel anything strange at first, but when he took another step, he felt like there was a suction force beneath his feet, sucking them in. With each step he took, the suction force increased by 3 times. When he reached the 6th step, the suction force had accumulated to 10 times that of the initial one. I see. When the foot from above came down, my 2 feet were being sucked in by the steps, so I could only take it head-on. The Eagle King dealt with it with his true form, so the suction force under his claws was the weakest. Coupled with his speedy movement skill, he was 1 step ahead of the others. Yun Yang walked up to the 7th step, but the expected attack did not come. He then went up to the 8th step, but there was still no attack. Yun Yang checked himself and made sure that he was in perfect condition before he calmly went up to the 9th step. 1 more step and he was on the 4th step. Could it be that his cultivation base was far superior than the others, that the foot had not attacked? At this moment, a whirlwind blew above his head. A giant foot materialized out of nowhere and came crashing down. Yun Yang arched his body and met the attack head-on. Boom! Both sides clashed head-on in the simplest and most direct way. King Yenluo, who was below, felt the world spin as if the entire world had been shaken by this attack. He could see stars and could not help but fall to the ground. When he lifted his head, he saw Yun Yang already standing on the 4th step in his purple robe. Beside him, there was still the boundless whirlwind that had just dissipated, like little green snakes that had yet to dissipate completely. It was only after a long time that the green whirlwind finally dissipated. King Yenluo's eyes were filled with shock. Could he have withstood such a kick? The attack of this foot depends on the cultivation base of the individual. The disciples of the 3 rulers and the Eagle King were all attacked at the 7th step. If they couldn't cross over, they would be defeated. It's a pity for the Eagle King. He had already crossed the 7th step to attack. If he could even survive the 8th wave of attack, he would be able to advance further. King Yenluo, come, use all your strength. King Yenluo took a deep breath and said, all right. He walked over with his head held high and chest puffed out, ascending the steps step by step. It was only when King Yenluo reached the 8th step that a foot came crashing down from above. However, Yun Yang, who was already on top, had a change in his gaze. This kick was much weaker than the one he had just now. Even so, King Yenluo's body was still thrown backward from the kick. His body was parallel in the air, but fortunately, he managed to straighten himself bit by bit. He heaved a long sigh of relief and opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. He then took another step forward and officially ascended to the 4th step. Congratulations. Yun Yang congratulated him sincerely. King Yenluo smiled bitterly. It was just luck. My luck can only bless me to reach this step. This is already very good. This is a level that the rulers of the 3 heavenly palaces have never been able to break through since the beginning of time. As expected, King Yenluo stayed on the 4th step for a moment. When he tried to climb the 5th step, he was pierced through the heart by a sword on the 8th step. When King Yenluo's silhouette disappeared, a wisp of gloomy mist formed into a strange shape and flew out with him. Then, objects of strange shapes flew onto him as well. Even with Yun Yang's eyesight, he could not see clearly how many of them had flown out. King Yenluo's body had completely disappeared. All that was left was a hurried sentence as he flew out. Lord Supreme Cloud, you must reach the top. Feng Lingtian said, I'm getting lazier and lazier. I've written 7,500 today. I wanted to save this chapter for tomorrow, but I'm afraid that I'll be even lazier tomorrow with this chapter. And my brothers will say that I'm stingy. I might as well post it first. Chapter 1448. His words were still ringing in Yun Yang's ears, but King Yenluo had already disappeared from this realm. Yun Yang was left alone in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Standing on the 4th level and looking at the stairs leading to the 5th level, Yun Yang's gaze was unprecedentedly solemn. He dared not be careless. Unlike the previous levels, the spirit fogman that appeared on this level was no longer simply attacking with his fists and legs. Instead, he was using weapons. The sharpness of the spiritual chi blades was incomparable to the fists and palms. The damage to the physical body was greatly increased, and the attacks were ruthless and exquisite. It was only the first contact, but Yun Yang was already at a disadvantage. He had no choice but to muster all his strength to destroy the spirit fogman wielding the spiritual chi sabers and swords. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and pulled out the divine edge quietly. The spirit fog being who had only taken the first step in the 4th level had already forced him to give it his all. If he did not fight back with his saber, he would be courting death. Currently, the lethality of the spiritual chi blades had increased exponentially. It was a situation that no one had ever set foot in or experienced since the beginning of time in the bound of universe. Yun Yang could not be sure where the limit of the spirit fogman's lethality could go, but he dared not fight it with his physical body like before. If the spiritual chi blade's power were beyond imagination, it was not impossible for him to be dismembered by a series of saber and sword attacks. It was better to be careful. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Clang, clang. Yun Yang stood at the edge of the stairs, not retreating even half a step. The saber in his hand was impenetrable as he moved forward step by step. If one were to look from below, it would look like a mountain of swords and sabers, shrouding Yun Yang in an overwhelming manner. In the surroundings, there were countless saber lights and sword lights that formed out of thin air. They were like mercury that poured onto the ground, penetrating through all the openings that they could find. Yun Yang executed Saber Truth, Destiny Blade, focusing on forcing his way up. He was invincible in front of him, and he was invincible in his heart as well. However, despite being invincible, Yun Yang still felt a sense of pride as if he was going to fight the world alone. The difficulty of this level was unprecedentedly high. For the challengers, it was not related to their cultivation, soul, divine sense, or any other aspect of comprehension. What this level helped them was to strengthen their martial skills from the very foundation. Yun Yang executed the divine edge over and over again, slashing out again and again to protect himself, leaving no openings. Each time he executed it, the result was only half a step forward. He might not be able to advance even half a step further, because after this half a step, he would have to endure even more attacks when he wanted to move forward again. Yun Yang could only swing his saber continuously, defending perfectly and attacking with all his might. But every time he executed the saber will technique of Heaven's Will, he felt the pressure from the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion increase by a notch. As the stalemate continued, Yun Yang found it difficult to cope with such a high tempo and high density of consumption, even though he was constantly gaining new insights and experiences. In this helpless situation, Yun Yang could only attack continuously to slow down the man in the fog's attack. Other than the Saber Will, Saber Truth, which almost drained his entire cultivation base, so what harm slaughtering the world? His mystical chi would be depleted every time he used the slaughtering the world, and he could only use the endless divine art spiritual energy to withstand it. However, the slaughtering the world could definitely stop the incoming attack temporarily once it was used. allowing Yun-yang to catch his breath and give himself a little more room to breathe. This allowed the endless divine art and saber truth Destiny Blade to turn more leisurely. When the saber truth Destiny Blade was fully executed, his mystical chi would be more or less recovered. It was fortunate that he had 2 cultivation method systems and 2 sets of famous techniques. Otherwise, he might not have been able to hold on. The 4th level setup is simply bullying. Yun-yang gritted his teeth and charged forward with all his might, cursing inwardly. With the current intensity of the attack, the King of Hell would not even be able to stand on the 1st step, let alone the 7th step. If it were Yun-yang, however, the force would be just as strong. Was this not bullying? The force of the oncoming attack was too strong. There was almost no room for resistance. Yun-yang, who was directly involved, could clearly feel that his saber skill was showing an extraordinary improvement under the pressure that surpassed his limits. Often, he could unleash a new understanding of a technique that his thoughts could not reach with a wave of his hand. In spite of this, the attack on the steps was changing at every moment. As Yun-yang grew stronger, so did the attacks. Yun-yang, who had always been slightly weaker, could do nothing but stare helplessly, unable to pass. The stalemate lasted for a full 2 hours. Yun-yang, who had expended a tremendous amount of effort and felt as if his body had been emptied many times over, finally reached the 8th level. He stayed there for 4 hours, swinging his saber without stopping. There was no purpose, just for the sake of swinging his saber. It was not until a moment of inspiration flashed in his mind, or perhaps the saber in his hand had inexplicably broken through a realm of saber, that Yun-yang finally stepped forward again, stepping into the 9th level zone. By the time Yun-yang's 2 feet reached the 5th level, he was no longer radiant or reborn. Instead, he had turned into a pile of mud, just short of collapsing on the ground. Even though he was trying his best to maintain his standing posture, he knew his condition the best. He could clearly feel that every inch of his bones had become as soft as cotton, especially his arms. He could not even lift up his saber. If it were not for the fact that the spirit fog people around him had stopped attacking and turned into dense spiritual chi to forcefully infuse into his powerless body, Yun-yang would probably have collapsed on the ground. Emmy, the constant cheat, was also exhausted. The spiritual chi blade formation that it faced earlier was very different from before. There was no spiritual chi to replenish itself, and it relied on Emmy to extract a large amount of mystical chi from its deific consciousness space to replenish itself. The dense spiritual chi that gathered now was probably the reward for successfully withstanding the spiritual chi blade attack. The soreness throughout his body had long reached its peak. Just as he was relieved from the previous attack, the strong attack came again. His mind was swollen and dizzy. It was a sign of overusing his brain. It's only 9 steps, but I've swung my saber more than 1,000,000 times when I charged up. Yun-yang thought about it and felt that the number was rather shocking. What kind of cruel training was this? Despite the rapid improvement, to the point where Yun-yang felt like he had ascended to heaven in a single bound, he did not want to go through such a cultivation process again, even with Yun-yang's tolerance level. At least, he did not want to go through it again in a short period of time. 1,000,000 full-force swings. If it were not for his saint cultivation base, the advancement of his previous cultivation base, and Emmy's replenishment, he would have died of exhaustion many times over if he were a Saint Lord cultivator or a half-saint cultivator instead. It had been too long since Yun-yang had felt this feeling of exhaustion, but he had felt it too many times just now. It was a state where he could fall into a deep slumber if he closed his eyes. Once he fell asleep, it meant that he had failed. He could only focus more on the fight, and as he fought, he would realize that he was no longer tired. Then, he would start to feel exhausted again in a very short period of time. If I really kill people, even if I only kill 1 person with each slash, I'll have to kill at least 1,000,000 people today. Yun-yang felt his right arm that seemed to have completely lost contact with him and chuckled bitterly. It was no wonder that the Supreme Heaven Pavilion selection was so difficult. No one had ever passed it since the beginning of time in the bound of universe. There were no unexpected checkpoints, no competitors, and no special design. But from the moment he entered, he felt that there was nothing special about it. However, from the moment he entered, the test had already begun. It was a challenge of endurance in all aspects. Physical body, soul, deific consciousness. It was a challenge of endurance in all aspects. Towards the end, it was no longer a simple test of endurance. There was also comprehension. The comprehension of one's cultivation method and techniques. temperament, intelligence, perseverance, comprehension. It was impossible to lack any one of them. For the first time in Yun Yang's life, he had cultivated to a point where he did not even want to continue. One could only imagine the weight of this. When he stepped into the boundary of the 5th level, Yun Yang could not help but feel the importance of accumulation. There was no other reason. After Yun Yang had recovered his cultivation base, he had calmed himself down and allowed the rich spiritual qi to settle in his body for a full 16 hours. It was not that Yun Yang did not want to continue to cultivate and reap more benefits, but the rich spiritual qi was not truly endless. After 16 hours of forceful infusion, there was no more of it. It was gone. Or perhaps, it had been completely used up? The spiritual qi blade earlier was extremely exhausting. Was this to make up for the depletion? My current cultivation base, be it my deific consciousness, mystical qi, or spiritual power, has increased by at least a fold compared to when I first stepped into the 1st level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. In terms of combat power, the increment is even greater, at least 3 times. Yun Yang had always been clear about his own ability. After a comprehensive assessment, his current assessment was not blindly arrogant. In fact, this assessment of 3 times was actually a humble way of saying it. I wonder what should I train in the 6th level? Yun Yang focused on the staircase that connected the 5th and 6th levels. Perhaps the spiritual fog had really been depleted just now. That was why there was no reaction when he reached the staircase. Yun Yang was still trying carefully, pressing lightly on the first step with one hand. There was nothing out of the ordinary. As Yun Yang pondered, he stood in front of the staircase to calm himself down. After adjusting his condition, he finally took a step forward. However, there was still no change until he reached the 9th step. The situation stunned Yun Yang and he did not know what to do. He didn't encounter anything and easily reached the 6th floor. Other than the forceful infusion of spiritual qi, there was no other setup or test between the 5th and 6th levels. There was no checkpoint. This realization made Yun Yang feel like he was dreaming. How could this be? He had already decided to endure 3 days and 3 nights on this staircase. Yet there was nothing at all. It was like he had already taken off his pants, but you did not prepare anything for him. What were you thinking? However, how could he not move forward when there was a smooth path ahead? He easily ascended to the 6th floor. When he stood on the 6th level, however, Yun Yang was even more bewildered. It was within his expectations. The spiritual fog figures that were everywhere did not appear. There were no blades of spiritual qi, nor were there any kicks and punches. Could it be that he had absorbed too much spiritual qi on the 5th level just now and the excessive consumption had caused no spiritual fog figures to fight on the 6th level? An extremely strange conclusion popped up in Yun Yang's heart. However, as he looked around, he gradually calmed down. What he saw around him were walls that were no different from an ordinary tower. The space of the 6th level could be seen in a single glance. The staircase to the 7th level was not far away. It only took 3 steps to reach it. Strange. Looking at everything on the 6th level, Yun Yang dared not be careless. He searched bit by bit, but after repeated checks, there was indeed nothing, not even a speck of dust. Yun Yang turned around swiftly. He saw that in a corner that he had just patrolled, there was actually a desk that had appeared. It was a very, very small study table, just like the table that a 3-year-old child would sit on. Behind the table was a small stool. What is this? Yun Yang walked over cautiously, step by step. He instantly realized that the key to the 6th level was probably on this study table and stool. When Yun Yang was within 3 feet of the study table, almost within reach of his hand, suddenly, a clear voice rang out, "What are you looking at?" Yun Yang was taken aback. Then, he saw a person appear out of thin air on the small stool in front of the study table. It was a child who looked to be only 3 or 4 years old. A little boy. At this very moment, the child was staring at him with a pair of big, innocent eyes that had a clear distinction between black and white. Yun Yang felt his mind blur. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head. Did he know this child? However, Yun Yang could not recall any impression or memory of this child, no matter how hard he searched through his memories. Then what was going on? "What are you looking at?" the boy asked again. Yun Yang was taken aback, slightly confused. "What are you looking at?" the child answered. "Can't you see? I'm reading a book." Yun Yang asked, "Reading a book? What book?" Yun asked. Do you want to read as well? Yun thought about it and said, if I do, can you show me? The child smiled innocently and said, sure, come and see. Yun did not move. What's your name? The boy answered, I'm 75. 75? Yun was stunned. Chapter 1449. How could such a fair-skinned and jade-carved little boy, whose words were well-organized and his mannerisms well-grounded, have a name like 75? How could 75 be considered a name? 75? Why are you called 75? I'm 75th in my family. The little boy smiled innocently. The more one looked at his little face, the more it looked like a ripe little apple. It was bright red and very cute. Yun's eyes widened as he praised from the bottom of his heart. Then your parents are really amazing. As a beginner who really wanted to understand the ways of the world, but had never understood the ways of the world, his obsession with certain things was very terrifying. What are parents? The little boy asked curiously with his big round eyes. The sudden question made Yun feel that he could not answer it. What were parents? You don't even know about this? Who raised you? Who gave birth to you? Yun asked. There's no one. The little boy bit his little finger and said innocently, no one raised me, and no one gave birth to me. Yun instantly felt that the tiny child in front of him was just too perceptive. A few more words and it would become difficult to communicate with him. There was always a difference in logic between a child and an adult. The sentence that was already at the tip of his tongue, where are your parents? It was forcefully swallowed back into its stomach. After all, this little fellow didn't even know his parents, so how could he have any adults? Then how did you get here? How would I know? The little boy said, it's my first time here too. This place looks so bright. It's a good place. The little boy's eyes were filled with love for this space. Yun turned to take a look. The 6th level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion could be said to be the narrowest space he had ever seen so far. The light in it was rather dim, and there was even fog that blocked one's vision floating in the air. How could such a place be bright? How could it be a good place? Should I say that this child is too easily satisfied, or that he has no ambition? This book in my hand. Do you want to read it? The little boy raised the book in his hand as if he was showing off. Yun looked over and saw that the book was black in color. There were words written on it, but he could not read them clearly. Just as he was about to focus his eyes to get a better look, the boy suddenly kept the book away and said, Right, can you do me a favor? Do you a favor? What is it? Yun was stunned again. Conversations with the boy were always unexpected and unexpected. The little boy said hopefully, when I grow up, I want to travel around. But now, nobody wants me to play in their world. Do you want me to play in your world? My world? Play. Yun was getting more and more confused by the boy's explanation. At this moment, he was at a complete loss. Yes. The boy looked at Yun with his clear, innocent eyes. I hope you can promise me to play in your world. If I can't go anywhere, I'll die. He looked at Yun pitifully. Are you willing to help me? Yun said cautiously, I don't understand what you mean. I can't promise you anything. The world that I'm in doesn't belong to me alone. During the selection of Supreme Heaven Pavilion, a child like this had suddenly popped up in the 6th level and his words were strange. Yun would not believe that there was nothing going on here. Therefore, although he had repeatedly confirmed that the person in front of him was indeed a child, he did not let his guard down. Instead, it was unprecedentedly heavy. He would not make any promises easily. Oh, you're so stupid. The boy pursed his lips in dissatisfaction. The others won't let me go, but if I don't go when the time comes, I'll die. Don't you understand? Yun frowned. It's better not to do things you don't understand. You said that no one raised you. Then how did you grow so big? How did you grow so big? When he said the words grown so big, Yun somehow felt that he could not bring himself to say it. To say to a 3-year-old child, you've grown so big, did not sound right. It was easy to say, but it did not sound nice at all. The little boy curled his lips and said, That's how long I was. That mountain was full of black fog, and there was enough black fog. After a long time, a heart would form, and after a long time, a black egg would form. After a long time I would come out of the egg. That's how everyone came to be. We're all like this. I'm the 75th. The boy seemed to be very proud of his origin, but he also seemed to be very proud of what he had said. Yun clicked his tongue in wonder and asked, "Everyone's circumstances are similar. How do you know that you're the 75th? Not the 76th or the 74th? The boy said, "This can't be wrong. I know it. Before I even hatched, I already knew that I'm the 75th. No, not the 76th, not the 74th. No egg hatched." Yun heart skipped a beat as another key phrase in the boy's words flashed across his mind. Wait, the hill is full of black fog? Time becomes a heart? If it's too long, it'll become an egg? If it's too long, it'll come out, the 75th? Could it be that this little fellow is actually a spiritual creature of creation that was naturally formed by heaven and earth? Yun looked at the boy again, scrutinizing him from head to toe. Indeed, there was a black mole between the boy's brows. There was one on each side of his brows, reflecting each other but not ruining his appearance. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing special about these two moles. However, upon closer inspection, one would feel as if they were connected to the myriad worlds in the universe. In spite of this, Yun felt as if his entire being was about to sink into it after focusing on it for a moment. However, Yun's state of mind was strong. With a single thought, he had already pulled his attention away. When he looked at the innocent boy again, there was only a tumultuous wave of shock in his heart. The birth of heaven and earth, the creation of spiritual creatures. What did this mean? Why don't others let you play in their world? Aren't they willing to make things easier for you? Yun asked cautiously. I don't know either. The boy said in distress. I think my 74 brothers might have caused trouble for others when they went out. With that in mind, they won't let me go. Will you cause trouble? Will you cause trouble for me? Yun asked again. I'm very obedient. I won't cause trouble, so of course, I won't cause trouble. The boy lifted his face excitedly, trying his best to show his cuteness. However, Yun saw another scene. The process was similar, but the result was the same. In the blurry image, a young man dressed in white stood tall, facing the boy. The boy asked, Can I go to your world to play? Can you make things easier for me? The white-clothed youth was about to answer, but for some reason, his face suddenly turned pale and he roared, No! The boy was disappointed. His head hung low. The image ended. Then, a young man dressed in green appeared. The boy asked, Can I go to your world to play? I promise I won't cause trouble. Can you make things easier for me? The young man's gaze went blank, his grace gone as he blurted out, No! After hearing the little boy's request, more than a dozen young men chose to reject him. The image ended there. What left the deepest impression on Yun was what one of the young men had said. You're causing trouble over there and I can't control it. I'll give you convenience, but my world has to bear a great risk. Who can guarantee that? The boy's expression darkened bit by bit as he was repeatedly rejected. As the images faded away, the boy dared not look at Yun anymore. He only lowered his head and murmured, Big brother, can I go to your world to play? Can you make things easier for me? Yun was only thinking about one thing. He couldn't control it. Why couldn't he control it? How could he not control a little boy when he was already at the level of a saint, and now that his cultivation base had improved further? Bao Er, the little boy from back then, had grown into an adult. Even though he had committed many perverse acts and caused countless troubles for the sake of the emperor's hegemony, with his return, everything had returned to its original state. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't care about it, rebuilding the universe was just a matter of a few words and a wave of his hand. Now, another young boy was asking him to make things easier for him. Should he give it to him? What kind of world is my world? Which world is it? The world I was born in or the world I'm living in now? Yun asked. The meaning of his words was obvious. The world he was born in was Tianxian continent while the world he was living in was the world he was living in. Yun had to at least know where this boy's goal was before he could decide what to do next. Unexpectedly, the boy's answer surprised Yun once again. His clear eyes were round and round. It's the world you've created. The world I've created? What kind of nonsense is that? Have I ever created any world? We can feel whose world is bigger. Only a bigger world has a place to stand and a place to stay. Your world is very, very big. It's the biggest I've ever seen. The boy was rather dejected. Actually, I didn't dare look for you previously. I looked for those that weren't that fun, those that weren't too big, but they all rejected me. No one made things easier for me. You're not going to reject me too, are you? What if I don't let you go too? Yunyang asked. The boy was disappointed. If you don't open the door, I can't go. I can only wait for death, he said. What if I let you go? Yunyang chuckled. The boy's eyes shone as he lifted his head and said excitedly, Then I'll owe you. Owe me. Yunyang began to ponder again, weighing the pros and cons mainly. He was calculating the possible losses. Yunyang did not consider how much he would get in return. Just like when he met the deities of God's tomb that day and returned God's bones, his original intention was not to repay the favor. Now that he had opened the door for the boy, it was easy to agree to it, but how much damage would he cause later on? How much damage could a child cause? With his current strength, what kind of loss could there be that he couldn't bear? Just as he was mulling over whether to reject the boy or not, an inexplicable thought suddenly turned into a monstrous wave, crashing into Yunyang's mind without warning. All of Yunyang's thoughts coalesced into one at that moment. Reject him. Reject him. Reject him. Yunyang's expression changed abruptly as he felt an excruciating pain in his head. The pain was so intense that it drowned Yunyang like a tsunami. Yunyang had once thought that after going through the trial of the million saber strikes in the 5th level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion, his willpower, determination had all advanced to the ultimate state of perfection. He would no longer be shaken by any external force, nor would he be affected by any pain. However, at this moment, this encounter told him that he was wrong. The agony he was feeling now was unprecedented, an extreme agony that life could not bear. In his mind, it was as if there were billions of ghosts wailing and wailing at the same time. At the same time, there was a clear feeling that came at the same time. Reject him. As long as you reject him, you won't feel any pain. Yunyang did not know that his expression now was exactly the same as the faces of the other youths he had seen when the boy had been rejected. Pale. It was so white that it had lost all color. The boy closed his eyes. His face was filled with disappointment and despair. After experiencing the agony, the answers of the dozens of young men were all, without exception, no. This big brother in front of him was the last one. As the agony washed over him, the boy saw Yunyang's expression change. Then, his own expression changed as well. Although he was still looking at Yunyang with hope in his eyes, his gaze was more gloomy than anything else. It was happening again. Previously, so many big brothers suddenly had a headache at this time, and then they all rejected. Would this big brother be an exception? If this big brother rejects me too, then I really have no one to ask. No one to ask, it means that there is no world to go to. Then, I will die in a few years' time. Should he agree or not? The agony was like a tidal wave, washing away Yunyang's consciousness. Billions of voices were screaming incessantly. Reject him. Reject him. Yunyang gritted his teeth, his entire body drenched in sweat. After going through the previous few levels, even the pain that an ordinary person could not bear was merely a joke to Yunyang. Therefore, Yunyang had great confidence in the level of pain that he could withstand. However, the headache he felt at this moment was several times more severe than the previous few tests combined. Yunyang felt that his consciousness had been shattered into a starry sky, almost out of his control. After a long time. It was only then that Yunyang finally felt his consciousness recovering a little. He endured the excruciating pain and opened his eyes a slit, only to see the helpless look on the boy's face, his gaze hollow. No one could withstand such agony. Just one word of refusal could end this pain, so who would choose to refuse? The boy had lost all hope. After too many times of disappointment, the last attempt had turned his disappointment into despair. The hollow gaze made Yunyang's heart skip a beat. Hesitation rose in his heart before an even more intense pain turned into the voice of Tao that shook him. Reject him. Reject him. The voice of Tao was asking him to reject him. However, Yunyang's last thought was clear. He felt that he should say yes. It was an extreme contradiction. There was only a sliver of Yunyang's lucidity. He knew that he could no longer withstand this deeper level of pain. He had to make a decision. With all his might, he resisted the command of the voice of Tao and roared, "I'll give you this chance." Even if he regretted it in the future, he could do as he wished now and not follow the forceful interference of the voice of Tao. If you hadn't interfered, I might have rejected you naturally. However, since you've interfered, I must say yes. The agony intensified tenfold, forcing Yun Yang to shut his mouth. Before his consciousness exploded, Yun Yang roared again, "I promise you that I'll open the door for you and let you go to my world." The boy who was still sitting behind the study table had a radiant glow in his initially disappointed and hollow eyes. With a cheer, he jumped up abruptly. "Thank you, big brother." Then, a beam of light emitted from the boy's body and swiftly disappeared from Yun Yang. The excruciating agony did not subside because of the boy's gratitude. Instead, it surged even more violently, as if it was a vengeful punishment. Yun Yang did not make a sound as he slowly fell to the ground. All of his consciousness had vanished in an instant. The last thing he felt was that his body and his consciousness had been divided into thousands of individuals, each of them suffering excruciating agony. He lay quietly on the ground, enduring it in silence. The boy in front of the study table cast a grateful gaze at him and murmured, "Thank you, big brother." Then, the young body turned into black light bit by bit and gradually disappeared. "I'll remember you." Just as he was about to vanish completely, a book flew out with a sudden force. Pa! The book fell to the ground. In the next moment, the boy disappeared, the study table and the small stool vanished as well. Only the black book quietly fell to the ground. I've had diarrhea for half a day after eating a barbecue. Chapter 1450. When Yun Yang regained his senses and regained his clarity, his first thought was that he had survived the ordeal. Then, there was a feeling of boundless sea and sky. He felt light all over, without the slightest hint of pain. It was as if his scattered deific consciousness had not returned to his body and was still roaming the universe. However, each strand was still connected to him, so he could clearly know the situation of each strand of deific consciousness. It was a marvelous feeling of being omnipresent and omniscient in the vastness of heaven and earth. His thick deific consciousness was no longer complete after this. It had turned into thousands of strands, but they were not tangled like a tangled mess. Instead, each strand was complete and well-proportioned. Although each strand of deific consciousness was thinner than his original deific consciousness, it was not weak. It could even be used as a complete deific consciousness. Did this not mean that Yun Yang had thousands of clones after this incident? Although the strength of each clone was not exactly the same as his original self, it could unleash the full potential of his original self. It would be a blasphemy to say that this deific consciousness metamorphosis has reached heaven in a single bound. This is basically crossing the galaxy and surpassing the universe. Yun Yang was stunned by his own improvement. He was still in a daze for a long time, unable to believe it. When he regained his senses and lifted his head to look, he realized that the boy had disappeared without him noticing. The table and chair were gone as well. There was only a book left on the ground. However, Yun Yang was not interested in the child's whereabouts for the time being. He was still immersed in the rapid improvement of his ability. While he was inexplicably delighted, he confirmed it again and again. After all, the improvement this time was too great, so great that it was unbelievable. Is this considered good karma? I only promised the boy to play. How did I get such a great reward? Yun Yang thought about it for a long time, but he still could not understand and was in disbelief. That kind of pain. Yun Yang grimaced. He did not want to experience that kind of pain ever again in his lifetime. Or perhaps the current state I'm in is actually the feedback of that pain? The shout just now turned into the voice of Tao in the end. It's not an illusion. This means that heaven's will is stopping the boy from growing. And I've played the role of the main character who has gone against heaven's will this time. Yun Yang felt like he had understood something. But that still doesn't make sense. He can't have gotten such a huge return just like that, right? It's a lot more than what I got when I helped the gods before. Yun Yang really could not figure it out. To put it bluntly, while the benefits given by the first 5 levels were enormous and beyond one's expectations, even if all of them were added up, they would not be as good as what he could get from this level. The stronger one's consciousness, the higher one's strength could be. However, the improvement of the consciousness was the most difficult aspect for a Xueqi to improve. After all, the consciousness could be said to be the most restrictive aspect of a Xueqi's strength. As for Yun Yang's current ability, at least in terms of deific consciousness. He had completely surpassed the saint level and reached the starry sky level. All he had to do was wait for the day when his celestial chi cultivation base made another breakthrough. Then, he would truly be able to step into the starry sky realm and completely leave the dominators of the bound of universe behind. This was a great opportunity. It was equivalent to removing the bottleneck in Yun Yang's cultivation in advance, leaving him with only the intention to improve. And the reason for all of this was because of this inexplicable increase in strength. Yun Yang could not figure it out, but the changes had already happened. Even if he could not figure it out, he could not afford to waste his time here. As he pondered, he went over to pick up the black book on the ground. A few words suddenly appeared on the black book. Supreme Good Karma. Yun Yang was taken aback. Supreme Affinity? Was it referring to the promise he had made to this boy? He had only agreed to go and play, and he had sown Supreme Affinity? Was Supreme Affinity actually so easy to obtain? When the black book was in his hands, Yun Yang flipped it open. There was a black fog rising from it, and the black fog transformed into 4 words. Record of the Hades. Record of the Hades? Was that the name of this book? Just as Yun Yang was deep in thought, he saw a black dot rising from his body and entering the Hades Occult Journal with a swoosh. The entire Hades Occult Journal then turned into a ray of black light and transformed into a small black token. The token was in the shape of a triangle, still exuding an eerie black fog. Yun Yang looked at the token again and saw a few words written on it. 9 Nether Token. The next moment, the token glowed and disappeared into Yun Yang's body. Yun Yang felt that his deific consciousness had been invaded by the Hades token. Although it was called a Hades token, it was more like a book, the Record of the Hades. There were too many secrets, martial arts techniques, and many mystical methods recorded within. Besides, there were also biographies of people. What caught Yun Yang's attention the most was the life experiences from the 1st to the 74th recorded in the book. However, more than half of the records were about dying young at the age of 9. At last, Yun Yang vaguely understood something. It's probably because this race was born from the heavens and the earth, created by spiritual beings. If they want to survive, they have to obtain the permission of others and enter the world of their target to train and grow, completing the process of their life training. This consent has to be done when they are at their youngest and most powerless. Their targets for help are those who are about to form a world or have already formed a world. However, in most cases, the target won't agree. It's either they reject it willingly or there's interference from external forces. Anyway, there are very few who agree. That's why the door of convenience that I'm willing to give is so precious. Yun Yang sighed softly. According to human nature, when a person had reached the pinnacle of a world and was about to open up his own world, he would be shocked to find a tiny suddenly appearing to talk to him, expressing his desire to enter his own world. This itself was a very frightening thing. Furthermore, there was heaven's will to stop him. Therefore, it was only human nature to refuse, and there was nothing wrong with it. Their race is named after the Hades. It looks like this race isn't recognized by heaven's will, or perhaps it's a race that has been abandoned by heaven's will. This time, I've agreed to it without hesitation by going against heaven's will. That's how I've obtained a supreme good karma. This good karma comes from the Hades race, not from heaven's will. Now that I think about it, I understand. Perhaps to him, such a trivial matter was not worth mentioning, but to the Hades race, it was a great favor. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a favor of life and death. That was why they had given him such a gift. With this, it could be explained more or less clearly. With this record of the Hades, I won't have to worry about having nothing to do in the future. Just reading the biographies of the characters inside. I can read them for 8 to 10 years. This is too rich. Yun Yang thought to himself, I wonder if this little fellow will really be very obedient when he comes to my world in the future. If he were to cause trouble, what kind of situation would it cause? As he thought about it, he suddenly chuckled. I can already open up my own world. Why should I be afraid of this tiny dot? Tidying up his thoughts, he stepped onto the path to the 7th level. Yun Yang was very interested to see what kind of obstacles there were on the 7th level staircase. However, when he turned around to look, he was stunned. Out of nowhere, there was an additional person dressed in black on the 7th level staircase. The man in black had long hair parted in the middle. He had a handsome face and a tall build. His every movement exuded a sense of carefreeness and ease. With his arms behind his back, His eyes were trained on Yun Yang. It was only for a moment, but Yun Yang felt a jolt run through his body, as if everything about him was seen through by the other party. Whether it was his previous life, this life, or even his lifetimes, they were all seen through by this person. He stood there, not moving an inch, but he gave Yun Yang a feeling that this person was undefeatable. Not only was he undefeatable now, no matter when or who it was, no one could defeat this person. This person was undefeatable between heaven and earth, in the universe. Seeing that Yun Yang was looking over, a faint smile hung on the man's face as he said, "You're not bad. You can withstand heaven's will and give him a chance to grow. No matter what, I owe you a favor." Yun Yang asked cautiously, "May I ask who you are?" The man in black guffawed and said, "The path of the younger generation should be walked by themselves. That's why I've never interfered in all these years. However, the twists and turns this time were beyond my expectations. 75 was destined to die this time. However, you've withstood heaven's pressure and opened the door." He stared at Yun Yang and enunciated each word clearly. "Are you willing to acknowledge me as your master?" "Acknowledge you as my master?" Yun Yang was dumbfounded. The newcomer's arrival and actions were abrupt. It had only been a few words, but he had already uttered such a question. A faint smile hung on the man in black's handsome face as he said softly, "Let me put it this way. I'm 75's eldest brother. Our clan was born from heaven and earth, but we're not governed by heaven's will. While we're blessed by heaven, we're also rejected by heaven's will. Our clan will give birth to a life nurtured by heaven and earth every once in a while, at the peak of the mountain where the 9 underworlds fog is the thickest. And this life is often the guide of our race." Listening to this, Yun Yang finally understood a little. Although he was still curious as to how such a unique clan could exist, he had a better understanding of the matter itself. I've mentioned earlier that the people of our clan have never been pleased by heaven's will. Naturally, such guides nurtured by heaven and earth are even more disliked by heaven's will. Such people have the ability to travel through space the moment they're born. Other than bearing this talent, there's also an extremely strict restriction. The restriction is that before they possess great power, they must find a new world on their own and obtain the permission of the new world's master to stay and survive in that world. There's an even stricter time requirement as well. Starting from the day of birth, if they can't obtain the permission of any world's master for the next 8 years, then they'll definitely die suddenly in the 9th year of their life. There's no way to save them and they can't be spared. That's why our clan calls this restriction the God's forsaken disaster, which means to be forsaken by heaven. There was a faint smile on the man in black's face as he narrated the cause and effect, but there was a faint hint of sorrow in his gaze. Once the permission is obtained, the youth of our clan will have passed the God's forsaken disaster. Then, even if there's still the possibility of dying prematurely, it's no longer an insurmountable disaster. Those who have escaped the disaster will always have a place in the world, the universe and the universe. The people of our clan were born by seizing the heaven and earth's creations, but how can there be many of them? Up until now, there's only 75 of us. Between the first to the 75, there's less than 10 who've obtained permission before they're 9 years old. The rest of the clan have all died prematurely, perishing in the God's forsaken disaster. The man in black said, "Originally, it's difficult for the 75 to break through. After you, it's impossible for him to meet another world's master. It's already a death sentence. But you, under the coercion of the Tao's melody, actually held on and made it through. You've opened the door for him, giving him a future. To the 75, this is a grace of rebirth. To the 9 Abyss tribe, it's a great grace as well." The man in black paused and continued, "So not only does the 75 owe you a great debt of gratitude, but my clan owes you a great one as well. If you're willing to acknowledge me as your master, I can promise to assist you to ascend to the 9th heaven and transcend it once more. This is the best repayment I can think of to you. It's considered helping others and myself, helping you achieve your goals and fulfilling my wish," the man in black said seriously. "So there's such a change in this. I've guessed it, but I didn't expect the implications to be so great." Yun Yang frowned and said respectfully, "Your words are sincere and sincere, I'm deeply grateful for it. However, this matter is of great importance. Can you allow me some time to think about it?" "There's no rush. Take your time to think about it." The man in black's smile grew more amiable, like a big brother looking at his little brother. Beyond the sky, many eyes were on them, A few of them were already cursing in indignation. Shameless! Utterly shameless! There's actually such a shameless person in this world. What a load of nonsense. This bastard. How dare he lie to my son-in-law? Don't stop me. I'm going to beat him to death. Go, go, we won't stop you. F***CK. Who's coming with me? I'll beat this old bastard to death. I'm not going. I'm not going either. I'm so pissed. On the other side. The white-clothed youth's gaze traveled across the endless starry sky, looking in their direction with a smile on his face. Old Black has a lot of hope this time. Up until now, everything he said has been the truth, spoken with utmost sincerity. If I didn't truly know his background, I wouldn't know the true meaning in his words. That might not be the case. Yun Yang has always exceeded expectations. He's intelligent and has great luck as well. He might not fall here. Yun Yang thought about it again and again. After a moment of silence he said, "This junior appreciates senior's good intentions, but my original intention of helping little 75 wasn't to be greedy for any repayment. Everything was merely fate. Besides, this junior has benefited a lot from this incident. If I'm greedy, I'm afraid my Taoist heart will be clouded. This junior appreciates senior's good intentions, but let's forget about taking him in as a disciple." Yun Yang's tone was resolute, without the slightest bit of hesitation. The man in black was immediately overwhelmed with emotions, bewilderment written all over his face. F***CK. Do you know who your father is? Your father has taken the initiative to take you in as a disciple and even promised to help you transcend the 9 heavens. Do you think such a promise can be made so easily? Also, your father has spoken so eloquently, not a single word is false. Why isn't this child moved? Could it be that I've been too emotional? Have I let this child see through my words? That can't be right. Even if there's a hint of a pun in my words, this child can't possibly hear it at this point. Young Yun, you have to think this through. This reputed one's ability. Even in the universe, I'm an almighty existence. Although I can't say that I'm number 1, I won't fall below number 2 either. I have the chance to take a stroll around the number 1 position from time to time. The man in black's tone was brimming with confidence. Do you know now? I'm the unrivaled expert of the universe. Taking me as your master is a great opportunity for you. If you hadn't saved 75 and done a favor to my tribe, I wouldn't have suggested taking you in as a disciple to end this karma. I'm really curious. Why aren't you willing to take me as your master? You don't expect anything in return for your kindness, and I want to fulfill your wish. If you take me as your master, you'll be the strongest in the universe in the future. I need a reason for you to reject me. In a few other spaces. Such *T. I thought Old Black was going to get his way. He's talking too much. Yes, Old Black is destined to be disappointed. It's fine if he doesn't say anything. The more he talks, the more he goes off topic. With Yun Yang's intelligence, how can he not be suspicious? It's over for sure. As expected, Yun Yang was heard saying, "This junior has no intention of doubting senior's cultivation base and ability. It's just that this junior has his own cultivation direction. Although senior is strong, your cultivation method may not be suitable for this junior. I don't know if this reason is sufficient." The attitude of this sentence was already very firm. The man in black had obviously realized that he had spoken too much and that it was fated that he could not take Yun Yang as a disciple. He laughed and said kindly, "It's fine if you're not willing. After all, everyone has their own aspirations. There's no need to force it. However, I see that you really admire me. Are you willing to take me as your adoptive father?" Yun Yang was stunned when he heard the man in black's words. If he could not take him in as a disciple, he had to take him in as a son? Was there such a thing? What was the meaning of this? Thinking about it, Yun Yang declined politely. This junior has a father and adoptive father. This junior appreciates senior's kindness. The man in black laughed heartily, not at all offended. He said calmly, "Young friend is indeed arrogant. This reputed one is impressed." In various spaces. Is he still planning to give up? What else does he want? He's already said this much. He should give up no matter what. Even the youth in white was frowning. Could it be that Old Black is planning to be utterly shameless? Thinking of this, his gaze froze abruptly as he said angrily, "Chase him out quickly." Before his words echoed in the air, the man in black sighed and said, "Young friend, you forged a good relationship first. If I really don't do anything, it'll be inexcusable, just like how I, the nine hells, don't repay kindness. How about this? Young friend, let us become sworn brothers. You've already rejected me twice, not thrice. You won't reject me a third time, will you?" Ha ha. The man in black guffawed, but the meaning behind his laughter was deafening and sensational. In his heart, however, he was thinking, "I don't even want my face anymore. What's wrong with wanting a brother?" Yun Yang was stunned once again. Without exception, all the other experts were stunned. No one would have thought that this fellow could actually be shameless to such an extent. Shameless. Shameless beyond belief. Shameless beyond belief. Your father has never seen such a shameless person. Boss, think of something quickly. This bastard is too shameless. Everyone looked at the big boss and sighed. This fellow has completely thrown away his pride and placed himself in the ground. There's nothing we can do about it. It's our fault for trying our best to stop him. The crowd's curses shook the three realms, but there was nothing they could do. Somewhere. The white-clothed youth was also dumbstruck for a long time before he involuntarily laughed and said, "Forget it, forget it. He doesn't even care about his face anymore. Let's consider him winning this round and gaining a helper. However, I'm still very interested to see if that little fellow will become his helper at that time." Sighing, he turned to take a look reluctantly and rubbed his face, murmuring, "This is a face. This is a face. Old Blacks. Could it be a buttocks? Cough, brothers and sisters, give me some recommendation votes, let me see how much I can raise." Chapter 1451. Yun Yang would never have known that his encounters here had been witnessed by so many people, clearly and clearly. He was deep in thought. Should he agree or not? Yun Yang's title of supreme wit was not an undeserved compliment. It was not difficult for him to discern the veracity of a person's words. He could be sure that everything the person before him had said was true. Even when he had said that he was the unrivaled expert under the starry sky, it was mostly the truth. Although this person had been replaced by a junior, he was still a terrifying, unparalleled expert. No matter how one looked at it, having a relationship with such a powerful being should have more advantages than disadvantages. It could even be said that there were hundreds of advantages and no disadvantages at all. Furthermore, the other party had shown kindness time and time again. First, he wanted to take him in as a disciple but was rejected. Then, he wanted to take him in as a godson but was rejected again. Now, he had lowered himself further and wanted to become sworn brothers with him. Just like what the other party had said, this was already the third time. If he were to do it again and again, he should not be doing it again. He really should not have rejected him. If he were to reject him again, not only would he embarrass the other party, he would also be suspected of not knowing what was good for him. Although Yun Yang thought highly of himself, he knew that the other party's status was too high, ridiculously high. Moreover, the matter of becoming sworn brothers didn't seem to matter at all. It would not be to the extent where they would be pulled together to do bad things after becoming sworn brothers, would it? Besides, the other party's status was so high that it was hard to say whether they could meet again in the future. This person was obviously not from this world. This was not the first time Yun Yang had formed a relationship with someone with a higher cultivation base and a higher status than him. He even had the chance to become sworn brothers. During the trip to the demon race, he had become sworn brothers with the Emperor of Felines and the Emperor of Foxes due to chance encounters. Therefore, although the man in black's actions were unexpected, Yun Yang's tolerance was not much of a test. Seeing that he was still thinking, the man in black said kindly, "Brother, do you really look down on Big Brother?" As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, he finally made up his mind. With a bitter chuckle, he said, "Of course, this young brother is willing to make friends with someone of a higher status. I'm just afraid that this swearing of brotherhood will greatly lower Big Brother's status. Big Brother is an almighty being of the universe, reigning supreme in this universe. This young brother is only a little famous in this world. Compared to Big Brother, I'm just an ant." Sigh. The black-clothed man waved his hand and said unhappily, "When brothers become friends, the first thing they pay attention to is congeniality. Could it be that my sworn brother needs to have a high cultivation base? Little brother, you look down on big brother too much. On the other side, many people retched and the curses became even louder. Bah, if you didn't know this brat, would you lower yourself like this? I thought little Hay was a character when I first saw him, but it turns out he's actually this kind of trash. I must have been blind. I can't believe there are such shameless and deceitful people in this world. Indeed, shameless people are invincible. Countless years have passed, and I've been through wind and frost, but I've never been able to see through a person's heart. Today, my horizons have been broadened once again. Initially, I thought this fellow was very arrogant, but in the end, he's just I despise him. This is bad, this is bad. This young brother is ashamed to accept big brother's favor. Greetings, big brother. Yun Yong bowed solemnly. The black-clothed man was overjoyed and said, Good brother, we brothers are like old friends and our hearts are connected, but we can't be so hasty. With a flip of his hand, an incense stick appeared in his hand. Ordinary people need 3 sticks of incense to become sworn brothers, but I, your brother, am the universe's unrivaled expert. Even heaven and earth can't withstand my bow. With this incense stick, I bear witness to my own heart as we become sworn brothers. As he spoke, he pulled Yun Yang to stand side by side and bowed together. This heart is above. This heart is eternal. Today, I, the first 9 abyss, swear to be brothers with Yun Yang. From now on, we shall share blessings and difficulties. Brothers of one heart, never to be separated. If I violate this oath, this heart shall vanish, the black-clothed man said. Yun Yang could only continue. This heart is above, this heart is eternal. Today, I, Yun Yang, swear to be brothers with the first 9 abyss, from now on. He repeated his words without changing a single word. After that, both of them stood up and stood side by side. The black-clothed man gripped Yun Yang's hand tightly. Brother. Big brother. Ha ha ha. The black-clothed man guffawed and howled into the sky. Your father finally has a brother. The words were said with a sigh. Yun Yang was genuinely puzzled by this. With his newly sworn big brother's ability, cultivation base, identity, and background, it should be a piece of cake for him to have a few sworn brothers. Why is he so excited to be sworn brothers with me this time? This shouldn't be the case, right? If I'm someone who's trying to cling to him, it would only be reasonable for me to lose my composure when my wish is fulfilled. The black-clothed man continued. Brother, you must cultivate well from now on. One day, you'll ascend to the 9th heaven. When that time comes, you'll transcend the path of Tao and shock the universe. If I have an opponent, I'll look for you to help me in battle. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something as he guffawed again. Yun Yang chuckled humorlessly. Big brother, you've overestimated me. With my cultivation base, it's still too early to ascend to the universe. The road ahead is too long. What you've said is too high and too far. I can't see the other end at all. However, if I'm really fortunate enough to ascend to the ultimate state in this life, as long as Big Brother has anything, just let me know and I'll be there without hesitation. The black-clothed man had been waiting for this sentence. Good, good, good. You're indeed a good brother that I like. Brother, you must remember this. You must remember this. No matter who the opponent is, you must help Big Brother. Ha! I've been fighting alone in the galaxy for so many years. The universe is my enemy. Yun Yang instinctively felt that something was amiss. The universe is my enemy. This. What kind of big brother did I recognize? If I acknowledge him as my big brother, I won't be beaten up every day, will I? The black-clothed man was still guffawing, inexplicably excited. At this moment, in his ears, there were already countless voices scrambling to be the first to speak. Shameless! You bastard! Where's your face? How dare you use such a despicable trick? Even if you're shameless and invincible, you should at least have some sense of shame, shouldn't you? I can't even look straight at you. You've exceeded the limits of my knowledge again. I've recognized you from today onwards. I've truly known you now. Countless voices fought to be first, bombarding the black-clothed man's ears incessantly. A few of them were so furious that they could not even speak. This was too shameless, too despicable. Among the many strong cultivators in the universe, it was the first time he had met someone who was so shameless, so unscrupulous, and so unscrupulous. The black-clothed man spoke to Yun Yang with a grin on his face, But his deific consciousness had long been divided into countless strands, scolding back and forth, refusing to back down. You're shameless. If you're shameless, would you have a few of you beat me up? You're shameless. Ambushing, using poison, and even sending a grand elder to fight me. You have integrity, shame, and despicable limits. Have any of you done anything that has any morals? You can't look straight at me? You've sent a madman who specializes in asking me if I'm handsome. Asking me non-stop for 2,300 years. Have you had enough of looking straight at me? And you. My face is my butt. What's your face? You sent one of your wives to my harem to get in touch with me, brought so many of my wives to travel, and then brought your other wives to beat me up. What a brilliant tactic. You're really not shameless enough, not despicable enough, not without a bottom line. Isn't the basic tactic you've been relying on bullying me because I'm alone? Bullying me because I don't have any brothers to help me? Let me tell you, your father has brothers now too. If you beat me up again in the future, I'll let my brothers do it. Ha! Before his words could echo in the air, another wave of scolding came from the other side. The black-clothed man was smug, not at all bothered by it. It was until a gentle voice rang out, "Hey Z, call me Godfather." As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone fell silent, shocked by the earth-shattering form of address. Godfather? Hey Z? Was this meant for the Nine Nether? Where did this come from? Just when everyone thought the black-clothed man would retort and scold him, the black-clothed man said with a face as dark as the bottom of a pot, "Do you want to die?" Ha! That's it? Where was the expected scolding and even a fight? The voice said lightly, "Now that you've become sworn brothers with my son, am I not your godfather? Don't you know how to pay attention to the hierarchy? Don't you have a little bit of seniority?" The black-clothed man was stunned for a long time. After a long time he said with sophistry, "Let's talk about our own. You and I have known each other for a long time, and we've always treated each other as equals. How can seniority increase so easily? How can there be such logic in this world?" The voice said, "Are you going to continue to call me brother after calling my son brother? It's fine if others don't have this blood relationship, but shouldn't you be more respectful to me?" The black-clothed man was utterly defeated, speechless. Then, guffaws could be heard in the deific consciousness again. Yes. In this case, Yun Yang is still my son-in-law. I'm his father-in-law and also his father. If you don't call me uncle, then there's no such thing as seniority. Yes, Yun Yang is also my nephew. As long as you call me uncle, I'll let bygones be bygones and not make things difficult for you anymore. Hey Z, be good, call me uncle, it'll hurt you. And me, you have to call me uncle. If you do, I'll be magnanimous. Well said. Now that we have this layer of relationship, we're on the same side. Why would we target you? However, remember to pay tribute if you have anything good. Otherwise we, as seniors, will still have to teach you, a junior, a lesson. Hey Z, do you understand? Hey Z, don't worry, we won't hit you anymore. How can there be adults bullying children and seniors bullying juniors? Hey, I'll bring my wife to drink with you tomorrow. Let's discuss about becoming sworn brothers. Welcome. Hey Z, you must be obedient in the future. Be good. The man in black's face was as white as the bottom of a wok. He was utterly disheartened and depressed. Yun Yang was even more confused. Wasn't he very happy just now? It was as if he had picked up a mountain of gold. Why did his face turn so ugly now? It was as if someone owed him 10 mountains of gold. Big brother? Yun Yang asked. Hearing the word big brother, the man in black's face twitched. He grimaced and suddenly heaved a long sigh. F***CK, your father is regretting it now. I've been too impulsive. However, thinking about it, there were only 2 or 3 people who could really take advantage of him. At most, your father can just avoid them. As for the others, they were all related in a roundabout way. Why should I give them face? Becoming sworn brothers with Yun Yang would be even more advantageous. Thinking about it, he was elated again. Having brothers and not having brothers was always different. He would no longer have to fight alone in the future, isolated and helpless. He could find someone to help him when he was bullied. He would no longer be alone like he was in the past, only able to spit out insults when he was beaten up. He would have to worry about being ambushed when he wanted to hit someone. If he was beaten up in the future, he could just call his brothers to look for trouble. Just thinking about it made him feel good. How dare you hit me? Humph. Even if I'm beaten up in the future, I'll have someone to go along with me. As he thought about it, the man in black was elated again. He smiled and said, "Brother, let's not talk about anything else. I'll send you up first. There's nothing to gain from this lousy pavilion. I'll help you ascend to the top and end the karma of this world. What else is there to be reluctant about? You must know that the path is ahead. Staying in one place for too long will only diminish your motivation." Yun-yang considered it seriously and said in a low voice, "Thank you for your kindness, big brother, but I still want to go up to the 7th level of Supreme Heaven Pavilion alone. There's no need to trouble big brother. Let's drink and chat when we have time." The man in black guffawed and said, "All right, I know that you're a proud child and don't want my help. If that's the case, big brother won't be meddlesome. The path of cultivation is to follow suit. I'll wait for your good news, brother." With a wave of his hand, a spatial ring landed in Yun-yang's hand. "This is big brother's greeting gift. If you're being courteous with me, then you're not my brother." Yun-yang wanted to speak out of instinct, to be humble, but he could not utter a single word because of what the man had said. "The items in here are what you can use at your current stage. I won't give you what you can't use. When you've grown a little stronger, big brother will come and drink with you again. There's plenty of time, plenty of time." The man in black guffawed. "Take care, brother. Big brother is leaving now." As his words trailed off, before Yun-yang could react, the man in black had already disappeared from the stairs. Yun-yang held the spatial ring in his hand, feeling as if he was in a dream. Why was there another big brother? I seem to only know this big brother as the number 1 of Abyss. I really don't know anything else, but this big brother is really straightforward. It was a pity that Yun-yang really did not know what would happen to him when he stepped onto the path of cultivation after acknowledging this big brother, and how miserable his days would be, in various spaces. Old Hay has really invested a lot this time. He's really become smarter. Who wouldn't say so? He actually lit up the stove ahead of time. And in such a large amount too. It's unexpected and thought-provoking. The key to his success is that he's shameless. I'll never do something like this. F***CKU. You're his father-in-law, of course you don't have to do it. In a certain space. The youth in white sighed softly. He buried the line so long in advance, but Old Hay actually beat him to it. Looks like I've really underestimated him all these years. The world is like a game of chess, unpredictable and vast. His reputation is well-deserved. A lady in white beside him smiled and said, "Come to think of it, you guys have to blame yourselves. You've bullied him so much all these years. If Old Hay doesn't change, he probably won't have a chance in the future. Now that he's tasted the sweetness, I'm afraid he'll." After saying that, she stopped and pursed her lips into a smile. "We really have to be on guard." The youth in white's gaze flickered, deep in thought. In the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, Yun-yang kept the spatial ring without checking it. The most important thing now was to rely on his own strength to ascend to the last level. There was no need to look at anything that would disturb his mind. When he left this place, he could look at it however he wanted. What was the rush? This paragraph will definitely not be written in this book. However, it's also a prelude for a certain book in the future. When I want to pull it out, I'll pull it out for fun. GT. Chapter 1452. The shadow of the man in black vanished. He had given up the chance to transcend from the ground and ascend to the starry sky. Yun-yang would not believe it if he said that he was not shaken or even regretful. In spite of this, Yun-yang believed that he could also ascend to the starry sky with his own strength. He was indignant to achieve such a state with the help of external forces, especially at a time like this. He was more worried that he would lose something. If he had gone up with the help of the man in black, Yun-yang was sure that although he could attain the power of the starry sky, it would be hard for him to improve in this lifetime. He would never be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the elder brother he had just acknowledged, let alone attain the supreme position of the starry sky. However, when Yun-yang stepped on the first step of the 7th floor staircase, the tinge of regret that he had initially felt was magnified abruptly. It was an overwhelming sense of regret that could not be further compounded. If he had known earlier, he would have asked his elder brother to send him up. Actually, It was already good enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Almighty. At least, it was much better than bearing the suffering before his eyes. The moment he stepped on the stairs, Yun-yang felt a piercing pain shoot up from his feet. A few powerful forces surged upwards, unstoppable and unstoppable, rampaging through his flesh and blood like hacksaws. A moment later, thousands of gusts of chilly wind descended from his Bai-Hui acupoint, filling his brain, chest, and internal organs. Another moment later, countless forces and types of forces surged forward, converging towards Yun-yang like a myriad of qi returning to its origin. Not only could Yun-yang not defend against such a force, he could not even defend himself against it. His flesh, bones, meridians, deific consciousness, and soul. Every part of him was pulverized under the overwhelming force. Yes, pulverized. Not only was he dismembered and broken inch by inch, but he was literally pulverized into powder. Right now, Yun-yang was like a ball of mud, slumped to the ground, allowing the invading force to knead him as it pleased. What was even more bizarre was that Yun-yang's senses were still present under such circumstances, and they were unprecedentedly sensitive. This had also resulted in Yun-yang being able to feel every bit of pain that he had to endure clearly and without mistake. However, this unprecedentedly sensitive sense was what broke Yun-yang the most. How good would it be if he had fainted? How blissful was that? Even if he died directly, he wouldn't have to endure such extreme pain. I want to give up. In spite of this, Yun-yang was not dead nor had he fainted. In fact, he was feeling everything that was happening in a state that was more lucid than usual. Even if his physical body perished, his spirit was still full of energy. His spirit and consciousness were still 100 times more spirited than before. Yun-yang almost cursed. His father's physical body was gone, and his nerves of pain should have been severed as well. How could he still feel it? This shouldn't be the case. It was completely different from the understanding of cultivation he had along the way. However, it was one thing for his physical body to shatter and his soul to dissipate, but Yun-yang's life force was still intact. If he did not adapt, he would stay here forever. Yun-yang struggled to save himself amidst the excruciating pain. His physical body had turned into dust, but he was still nearby. His soul had dissipated and was scattered around as well. He needed to save himself. Only by saving himself could he have hope and a chance. If he gave up now, he would only be paralyzed and he would not be able to get through this stage. Yun-yang gathered his scattered soul amidst the excruciating pain. Finally, after the previous incident, Yun-yang's soul had grown stronger due to his deific consciousness. Although it was scattered by countless forces, he could still sense and control it. As Yun-yang gathered his soul bit by bit, he used the power of his soul as a foundation to reconstruct his body from head to toe, bit by bit. However, with every bit of flesh and blood that was reconstructed, the pain that came with it increased by several folds. The excruciating pain that filled every part of his body and heart was incessant, assaulting Yun-yang's spirit without a break. Yun-yang had finally reconstructed his shoulder, but an unprecedented pain assaulted him, distracting him for a moment. His newly reconstructed physical body crumbled again, all his efforts going down the drain. Yun-yang cursed 10,000 different profanities in his heart, using them to vent the emotions that felt like a million beasts were galloping past him. However, there was no other way. If he failed, he could only start all over again. There was only one way to describe such a situation. He had to endure the torture of 1,000 cuts, and yet he had to laugh heartily, without the slightest bit of reluctance. He had to be happy from the bottom of his heart, and he could not be distracted at all. A slight distraction meant that he had to start all over again. All his efforts would vanish in an instant. Yun-yang, who had maintained a clear mind, was extremely dispirited. Was this really him? Could he really make it? Could he actually do it? After a full 2 hours, Yun-yang had finally regathered his physical body. However, his physical body was extremely frail now. He was only sustained by the power of his deific consciousness. There was not a single ounce of energy left in him. He stayed where he was, slowly adjusting his breath and recuperating his foundation. However, in the process of nurturing his body, Yun-yang was shocked to realize that the flesh and skin of his reconstructed body was glowing with a faint silver light. The sturdiness of his body had increased by almost half compared to before. Although there's a significant improvement, the price is too high. I might have to stay here forever if I'm not careful. Yun-yang, whose physical body had been fully restored, could finally catch his breath. Without any discomfort, he stepped onto the second step naturally. The second step shouldn't be like this, should it? His first foot did not feel anything at all. Delighted, Yun-yang hurried to step on the second step as well. Arg! Yun-yang let out a heart-wrenching howl as he collapsed like a pile of mud for the second time. The process was the same as before, but perhaps because his physical body was much stronger than before, the pain from the disintegration of his physical body had increased tremendously this time. With his first experience, Yun-yang did the same as before, struggling to survive and reconstructing himself. When he was done with the second step, Yun-yang's flesh and blood were glowing a bright silver. When he was done with the third step, Yun-yang's flesh, meridians, and bones had turned a pale gold. At the fourth step, his flesh and bones were gold while his internal organs were pale gold. At the fifth step, his flesh and bones were jade while his internal organs were pure gold. At the sixth step, his flesh and bones were precious jade while his internal organs were white jade. When he reached the seventh step, he was transparent from the inside out. At the eighth step, the inside and outside of his body were one, clear and transparent without any impurities. When he reached the final ninth step, all the strange colors that were different from his physical body had faded away, returning to the original color of his body, which was called the human color. It looked like he had returned to his original appearance, but Yun-yang truly felt that he was completely different from the inside out. Yun-yang had finally ascended to the seventh step, the highest level of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion that had only been passed down in legends for a long time. No one had actually stepped into it. However, he had already lost track of time. He had no idea how long he had been in here. It was just that the time he took to reconstruct his body grew longer and longer until he did not notice the passage of time at all. He ascended in high spirits, confident that even if there were still obstacles in front of him, he would be able to deal with them. After ascending to the seventh level, he didn't encounter any more trials. Instead, the entire seventh level was filled with strange phenomena. Golden lotuses were descending from the heavens, one after another, falling from the heavens. Yun-yang was bathed in the glow. His soul, deific consciousness, flesh and blood, meridians, and bones. They were all strengthened again and again by the golden lotus light that filled the sky. The golden lotuses continued to fall, the glow getting brighter and thicker. Yun-yang was bathed in it, feeling indescribably comfortable. At the same time, he could feel his cultivation base growing rapidly, like an ordinary person who was riding on the clouds. When I first entered the Supreme Heaven Pavilion, my cultivation base was only at the beginner level of a saint. Now, I've at least advanced to the pinnacle of a saint's intermediate level, and I'm still growing stronger. Doesn't this mean that my cultivation base has advanced by 2 levels this time? There's also the evolution of my deific consciousness, the strengthening of my flesh and blood, and the strengthening of my bones and internal organs to the golden body level and above. In this case, my ability has increased by at least 10 times. However, if I were to choose again, I might not choose to enter the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. It was not that Yun-yang's Tao heart was unstable, but the final test of the 9 flights of stairs was too perilous. Even with his endurance and determination, he could not help but shudder. Lingering fear was not even enough to describe a fraction of it. Even if the so-called purgatory test was made real, it could only be as terrifying as this. Recalling the last part of the journey, Yun-yang knew that there would be a test on the first step, so he was more or less prepared. Although the process was excruciatingly painful, even shrouded in the shadow of death, Yun-yang did not lose his confidence. He did not give up, working hard to reconstruct his physical body and get through the dangerous stage. When it came to the second step, Yun-yang had misjudged the situation, thinking that there would be no more obstacles. He did not expect the difficulty to multiply, almost causing Yun-yang to lose his confidence. On the other hand, from the third step onwards, the agony increased by more than double with each step. Yun-yang was slowly getting used to it. He had to walk through this test and finish it. Otherwise, he would be immersed in this trial for the rest of his life. It was this understanding that urged Yun-yang to complete the entire journey. In spite of that, his physical body disintegrated again and again. Even if he said that he had gotten used to it, it did not really matter. Although he had experienced injuries all over his body before, none of them had been as extreme as the one in the trial. Moreover, from the second step onwards, the strengthening did not matter at all. Those who had to endure the torment were all new flesh. The new flesh that had just grown was crushed into puddles. What kind of feeling was that? It had to be tormented over and over again. Yun Yang could not help but admire himself when he thought about it. He could not help prostrating himself. You're amazing, young Master Yun. I think that all the heroes in this world should admire you. All the beauties in this world should fall in love with you. You're truly worthy of it. Just because of this, it's enough. Young Master Yun, you should be the dream lover of all the women in the bound of universe, the #1 idol of all men. How did you get through it? I'm completely convinced by you, however. Yun Yang did not have the confidence nor the courage to come back to Supreme Heaven Pavilion again. A large part of the reason he had to endure it the first time was due to the fearlessness of the ignorant, and the fact that he was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he did not persevere, he might perish forever. He had no choice but to do it again. He would be crushed by his own psychological construction before he even started. Yun Yang could not help but sigh with lingering fear. The Golden Lotus baptism was still going on, falling piece by piece. Yun Yang did not have enough time to absorb the baptism into his body, but he did not waste it either. The excess was absorbed by the greedy Emmy into his deific consciousness space. His deific consciousness space was also filled with golden lotuses. The golden lotuses in the sky were still falling, as if there was no end to them. Yun Yang's cultivation base improved bit by bit, advancing bravely and vigorously. Dongfang Haoren and the others had only waited outside for a few days before their disciples flew out like cannonballs. What comforted the three rulers was that 3 of them had already obtained the qualification to inherit the Celestial Palace. The most basic task had been completed successfully, so the trip was not in vain. After a while, the Eagle King came out as well. He had lasted a little longer than Huan Wenyuan and the others, so naturally, he came out a little later. However, Yun Yang had not come out yet. The 3 of them discussed and decided to continue waiting. After all, they were very interested in the future of Supreme Heaven Pavilion. After waiting for a day, King Yama left the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion in a gray fog. Shiman Fengfu and the others wanted to stop this guy and ask him about his origins. However, after King Yama left the Supreme Heavenly Pavilion, he plunged into the ground and disappeared just like that. He did not care about them at all. The 3 rulers were caught off guard and could do nothing about it. Yun Yang was still inside. Let's wait for Yun Yang to come out and leave together. It looks like this child has gained a lot in Supreme Heaven Pavilion. However, another 10 days had passed and Yun Yang still had not come out. Eagle King, go back with Lanting and the others and explain the situation here. We will continue to wait here. More than a month had passed. Why isn't he out yet? 2 months had passed. Are we still waiting? What has Yun Yang gone through? Why hasn't he come out after going in? As the 3 of them were discussing, there was a sudden swoosh in the sky. Supreme Heaven Pavilion had disappeared. All that was left was a piece of paper fluttering down from the sky. Supreme Heaven Pavilion will never come out again. Reading the contents of the paper, the 3 rulers felt a sense of loss. Supreme Heaven Pavilion that stood proudly at the pinnacle of the bound of universe, the most mysterious and towering for countless years, had actually disappeared. Where had Yun Yang gone then? The 3 heavenly palaces have been using this to select their heirs for hundreds of thousands of years, but now it's gone. What's more infuriating is that once Yun Yang went in, Supreme Heaven Pavilion disappeared just like that. Who would believe that there's no connection between the 2? Shiman Fafu frowned. Is there even a need to ask? Bei Gong Lioli rolled her eyes. I'm already suspecting that the 3 heavenly palaces have been wasting our efforts all these years. We've been putting on a show for the blind, and we've been delusional. Supreme Heaven Pavilion has actually been waiting for one person from the beginning, and this person is Yun Yang. As for you, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Silly bird. Bei Gong Lioli spat on Shiman Fafu's face. Shiman Fafu was not angered, but he sighed dejectedly. I think so too. All these years the Supreme Heaven Pavilion has been toying with us. Dongfang Haoren was stunned for a moment before he said, It might not be Yun Yang. It's just that none of the successors of the 3 heavenly palaces has been able to obtain the true heritage of the Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Now that the Supreme Heaven Pavilion is no more, I believe Yun Yang has a place to go. We don't have to wait any longer. Let's go back. We still have to train the younger generation and plan how the palace will be passed on in the future. Once everything is settled, we can officially hand over. Then, the 3 of us can rest for a while. Shiman Fanfu chuckled. Rest? I'm afraid we'll have to go to the Blood Soul Mountain and rest while fighting with the demon clan." The three of them laughed and left together. "I have no confidence in this battle." "I'm not sure either. But we only have one life, and our mission has been completed. We've protected the Heavenly Palace well, and our heritage hasn't been broken in our hands. The demon clan hasn't been able to take a step past the Blood Soul Mountain. As for our fellow humans, we've been recuperating, and our population is 10 times more than when we first became palace masters. At least in terms of human reproduction, we've done well. Now that I think about it, the only thing we haven't done well is probably not teaching our sons well. We've let down our brothers who died in the battle. But we've given birth to a few more. If there's a chance, we must train them well. It's all thanks to Yun Yang that we have these children." "Do you King know how to talk?" "Shut up if you don't. I should say, it's all thanks to Yun Yang's air of vitality." It's easy to misunderstand this. Just say, "It's all thanks to Yun Yang's help." Get lost. The three of them bickered as they walked away, relaxed. A whole year had passed. In this year, the bound of universe had changed drastically, even more than the changes of the past 10,000 years. The Palace of 9 Supremes rose mightily. Wherever it passed, it was invincible. The Demiurge Flawed 10 stepped into the martial world once more. Each of them had a brand new title, and they were renowned in the bound of universe. No one dared to mention their past names anymore. Well, it was mainly because no one dared to. First, there was the incident of Phoenix Cry Sect's eldest disciple, Chi Lai's humiliation and the massacre of the Palace of 9 Supremes higher-ups. As for the latter, almost all the famous rankings in the martial world had been occupied by the Palace of 9 Supremes disciples. They could not wait to avoid it, so they would not overestimate themselves and seek death. The Heaven ranking, Earth ranking, Man ranking, and Rookie ranking had basically become the stage for the Palace of 9 Supremes disciples. Disciples from other sects would never be able to squeeze into the top 10 or 20 rankings anyway. If it was the top 50, perhaps 3 to 5 of them might be lucky enough to make it. The Palace of 9 Supremes' achievement had confirmed that it had become a supreme-class sect that had never appeared in the bound of universe since ancient times. 7 months ago, the Palace of 9 Supremes' 4 disciples had challenged the heirs of the 3 heavenly palaces and divine punishment Holy Land and won, shocking the world with their achievements. 5 months ago, the Palace of 9 Supremes' High Priest, Dong Qitian, had led 3 half-saints and 24 Lord Saints to challenge the same-level experts from the 3 heavenly palaces. In the end, the record of 25 battles and 17 victories had shaken the bound of universe once more. From that day onwards, the Palace of 9 Supremes had become the bound of universe's undisputed #1 sect, although it was still below the 3 heavenly palaces and divine punishment Holy Land in name. No one dared disobey its command in the martial world. The Palace of 9 Supremes' disciples had grown to 100,000. This number was only after the official disciples had reached 100,000, when the Palace of 9 Supremes officially announced that it would close its doors and no longer recruit disciples. In the future, it would open its doors once every 60 years to recruit disciples. Otherwise, the number of disciples would continue to increase. Everyone was surprised and puzzled by this decision. The sect leader has said that the doors will be closed when the number of disciples reaches 100,000. Sect leader Yun has said that the martial world cannot be dominated by one sect. 100 sects contending for supremacy is the way to long-term peace. As for the Palace of 9 Supremes, it had already possessed the same or even stronger strength as the 3 heavenly palaces, but it had not been upgraded. The sect leader is not here. Everything will be handled when he returns. After winning the challenge against the 3 heavenly palaces' Lord Saints, the Palace of 9 Supremes would send 20,000 experts to guard the Blood Soul Mountain every 2 months, rotating every 2 months. One of the reasons for this was that the heads of the demon experts were a major source of contribution points for the Palace of 9 Supremes. It was also because of this that the Palace of 9 Supremes' method of nurturing disciples was very different from before. It was no longer the nanny and protection of the disciples like before, but the disciples were free to go on their own. If the disciple died, the sect would avenge him or her, but they would definitely be the nanny and escort him or her. This was so that the disciples could receive the most extreme training in actual combat. Life and death depended on themselves. This proposal had caused great controversy within the Palace of 9 Supremes, and it had only been approved after a long time. It had to be said that the cultivation base of the Palace of 9 Supremes' disciples was secondary after that. Their actual combat strength had suddenly become terrifying. Even if their own cultivation base and strength were equal, or even slightly superior, when they encountered the Palace of Nine Supremes disciples, the disciples of the Palace of Nine Supremes would mostly win. When 10 months had passed, the East Celestial Palace's Lord, Dongfang Haoren, sighed from the bottom of his heart. As long as the Blood Soul Mountain is not lost, the Bound of Universe will enter the era of the Palace of Nine Supremes. This deadline will be far, far away. He then added, unless the Palace of Nine Supremes falls into internal strife and falls apart many years later, no one and no force can shake it. When this sentence spread throughout the martial world, it was ordered by the Palace of Nine Supremes leader's wife, Xueqi, to be engraved on a stone tablet that was 1,000 feet tall. She then combined the power of all the saints in the Palace of Nine Supremes to strengthen the stone tablet permanently, and placed it at the most prominent mountain gate of the Palace of Nine Supremes to serve as a warning to future generations. Throughout the year, the sky above the Palace of Nine Supremes shone brightly. The wife of the Palace of Nine Supremes leader, Xueqi, had broken through to the saint level after Yuanyang. Rainbows fell from the sky and golden lotuses bloomed from the ground. A few days later, Shangguan Lingxiu, the wife of the Hall of Nine Supremes leader, broke through to the saint level as well. A strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. Half a month later, the chief high priest of the Nine Supremes temple, Dong Qitian, broke through to the saint level. In another 20 days, Shi Wuchen, the Temple of Nine Supremes Vice Supreme, was the first to break through to the saint realm, followed by Luo Dejiang and Tai Qingcang. At this point, the Palace of Nine Supremes had a total of 6 saints. Such strength was enough to suffocate the entire Xianhuang world. By the end of the year, the Temple of Nine Supremes had more than 200 lords and at most 15 half-saints. Among them, Ling Xiaozue and Dugu Chou had broken through to Sage to be. This kind of overall strength was already comparable to the combined strength of the 3 great heavenly palaces. Even if they were to face the combined strength of the 3 great heavenly palaces head-on, they might not necessarily lose. Just as Dongfang Haoren had said, the era of the Nine Supremes had officially arrived. 2 months after the New Year's Day, the entire Xianhuang world, including the various levels of the planes, suddenly received a piece of news in their dreams. A message from the dream. From that day onwards, the underworld would be reopened, and the 6 paths of reincarnation would be reopened. For a time, the legend of the 6 paths of reincarnation spread like wildfire. Everyone had the same dream. This was already a shocking miracle, but what was even more shocking was that the person who spread the news was from the Palace of Nine Supremes. On the same day, thunder rumbled in the sky. Countless rainbows filled the world, crisscrossing and crisscrossing, including the realm of demons. Rainbows hung in the sky as spiritual chi of heaven and earth poured down. Everyone raised their heads and stared at this strange phenomenon. In the sky, a magnificent and majestic palace was hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible, slowly ascending. From being clearly visible to being blurry to being even higher and finally disappearing. In the end, a dazzling rainbow fell from the sky into the Palace of Nine Supremes and disappeared. Another wave of extreme Yin Qi rose from the ground and turned into a nether dragon. Shaking its head and tail, it also rushed into the Palace of Nine Supremes and disappeared. Before the Palace of Nine Supremes, there was an additional white fog pool, and behind the mountain, there was an additional Yin Yang River. Each of them had their own mysteries. At the same time, the demon race seemed to be aware of the situation in the Bound of Universe and began to intensify their attacks. They could accept that the 2 sides were evenly matched, but they would not allow the Bound of Universe to be stronger than the demon race no matter what. Now, new faces kept appearing at the entrance of the Blood Soul Mountain, which made the demon race realize that the Bound of Universe was moving closer to the bottom line. This chapter was 6,900. Many things were starting to be simplified. Thinking of the 2 pitfalls, he was a little lost. Let me think of how to make up for it. Chapter 1453. Everyone, please understand that I'm going to drink with the old man to his heart's content today. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival to everyone from I Am the Supreme. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1454. However, when the residence of Nine Supremes was developing rapidly, their sect leader had gone missing once again. He had gone missing when he was in the same place with the 3 rulers of the Bound of Universe, carrying out a task together. When Dongfang Haoren and the others returned, they sent a message to the residence of Nine Supremes, stating that Yun Yang had gone missing when he was challenging the Supreme Heaven Pavilion and that his whereabouts were temporarily unknown. With this, the residents of 9 Supremes, who were not anxious at all, became even more relaxed. Their attitude was like they did not suspect that the 3 rulers had plotted to murder their own sect leaders upon seeing the 9 Supremes' palace's bright future. They believed everything they said and waited patiently. What was even more surprising was that not only were the people of the Palace of 9 Supremes not anxious, even the 2 sect leaders' wives were not worried at all. It was rather puzzling. Zhan Wufei, the leader of the Sacred Heart Palace, an old acquaintance of the Palace of 9 Supremes, would visit the Palace of 9 Supremes whenever he was free. Of course, his main purpose was to freeload the cultivation environment. He had once joked with Ji Lingxi, sister-in-law, that fellow Yun Yang has suddenly disappeared. With his current cultivation base and capability, there doesn't seem to be anyone in this world who can do anything to him. His sudden disappearance. I'm thinking, maybe he's hiding somewhere to have some fun. Sister-in-law, you have to keep a close eye on him. Supreme Yun is a hot commodity in the hearts of the ladies in this world. Ji Lingxi replied gracefully, Don't worry, Brother Zhan. Men are all like this. Let him go out and have fun. When he's done, he'll naturally come back. Shangguan Lingxiu chuckled and said, When Yun Yang comes back, I'll definitely ask him where he's fooling around. If Brother Zhan says so, of course, he has a criminal record. Zhan Wufei pulled a long face and said, Actually, I'm only mentioning a possibility. I didn't say that Brother Yun has really gone out to have fun. I'm actually not very close to him, really not. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly ran away. Was it true that Zhan Wufei was not close to Yun Yang? They had only met each other 3 to 5 times. So what Zhan Wufei had said was the truth. However, everyone in the Bound of Universe knew that Sacred Heart Palace's Hall Master Zhan and residents of 9 Supreme Cloud were very close, and they were like old friends. If he were to be taught a lesson by Yun Yang because of this, Zhan Wufei felt that he would be in a worse state than Yun Yang. It would be strange if Yun Yang did not kill him. What he did not know even more was that after he left, Ji Lingxi and Shangguan Lingxiu had gathered for a small meeting to confirm their strategy. Say, do you think this fellow has really gone out to fool around? Ji Lingxi frowned. I don't think so, but this is really hard to say. Shangguan Lingxiu frowned as well. This fellow has indeed been held back by us. I heard that when a man becomes an adult, especially a young man like that fellow, he will always have some desire. Sister Lingxiu, look at you. I didn't have a choice here. It wasn't my wish to keep him to myself. You said that you asked your master for help. That's why you ended up like me. Ji Lingxi was a little distressed. Shangguan Lingxiu blushed as she retorted, Pfft. What are you talking about, girl? What are you willing to do? Don't you know any shame? If I were to snatch it from you, would you have given in? Wouldn't you be staring at me all the time? Ji Lingxi sighed and said, Why would I stare at you? We've been his since a long time ago. What's there to be shy about? What's the use of being the sect leader's wife now? What if someone really snatches it away from me? If I didn't have this, I would have. Sister Lingxiu, do you think he's still young? After this year, he'll be 25 or 26. What he cultivates isn't the virgin skill. Even if it was, with his current cultivation base, he would have completed it a long time ago. What if someone else takes advantage of him if he continues like this? Shangguan Lingxiu lowered her head, blushing without saying a word. After a while, her face and neck were flushed, as if she wanted to say something but dared not. Ji Lingxi began to grumble again. It's all that person's fault. I don't know what kind of restriction he put on me, but it's so overbearing. I'm already at the level of a saint, but I still can't remove it. I can't even control it. This is really infuriating. When I see him, I'll give him a good scolding no matter who he is. Controlling heaven and earth, and here it is. This old fart's method is simply deranged and makes one's hair stand on end. Ji Lingxi's pretty face was filled with anger, embarrassment, and anger. Shangguan Lingxiu's face was as red as a sheet as she suddenly said, Well, younger sister Lingxi, there's something I forgot to tell you. When I asked my master to help me set up the seal that day, there was an additional layer. Ji Lingxi's expression darkened when she heard that. Do I have to become a cosmic almighty to remove it? How can I do that? Shangguan Lingxiu's pretty face looked like it was about to bleed.
No.
Actually, my grandmaster said that the cultivation base of a saint is the pinnacle of the bound of universe. So as long as Yunyang and I are both at the level of a saint, the restriction on me won't work anymore. Lingxi was taken aback, only replying after a while, doesn't that mean? The two girls mumbled for a long time. Shangguan Lingxiu was flushed throughout while Lingxi was exhilarated. Wait for him to come back. You're lucky, humph. Yunyang was still in Supreme Heaven Pavilion. Supreme Heaven Pavilion was said to be no longer in the bound of universe, but it did not really cease to exist. The golden lotus descending on the 7th level had long disappeared, but he had yet to wake up. Instead, he was immersed in a deep level of enlightenment. The martial way, the martial way. Entering the Tao from the martial way? Or was it because of the martial way? It was said that the cultivation of the martial way was a defiance of nature, but each time there was a breakthrough at a critical moment, there would always be some blessings from the heavens. For example, some breakthroughs in the level would attract the heavens' thunder trial. How many talented heroes would perish under the thunder trial and die prematurely in the process? However, as long as one survived the thunder trial, he would be reborn and his ability would take a leap. If the cultivation of the martial way was truly a defiance of nature, there would only be death or overcoming the obstacle. There would not be a rebirth after overcoming the obstacle and the death trial, nor would there be a sudden rise in ability. It was a breakthrough in the level of the cultivation method, but it was undeniable that it was also the generosity of the heavens. From this enlightenment, Yunyang felt that this was not a defiance of nature, but a test of one's standards by the heavens. If one passed the test, one would naturally be rewarded. Conversely, those who did not would have to pay the price. Therefore, cultivation is not a defiance of nature. As Yunyang thought about this, he suddenly felt that his thoughts were unprecedentedly smooth and clear. Cultivation is nothing but using one's own effort to break through the shackles that seem impossible in the eyes of others. He retreated from his thoughts, feeling that his body had undergone a qualitative change. However, it was still unclear how far he had gone. It was difficult to come to a conclusion. He was the only one left in Supreme Heaven Pavilion, and it seemed like he was no longer on the 7th floor but in a spacious hall.
Hall. Here.
It was at this moment that a voice called out, "Young Nine." Yunyang turned to look towards the source of the voice. What he could see was a brightly lit hall. It was a huge dining hall. Behind him, a smiling face was warm and radiant, a beauty that could topple a city. The beauty was right in front of him, but the true identity of the person in front of him shocked Yunyang. For a moment, he could only feel himself trembling, the blood in his body almost rushing to his face. He said in disbelief, trembling, "Sister Yu?" The woman in front of him was elegant and graceful. Her charm was indescribable. Who else could it be other than Yun Zuyu, whom he had not seen for a long time? Beside her, another woman smiled sweetly and said, "Do you only see your sister Yu and not me?" The person who spoke was also extraordinarily beautiful, like an orchid in the deep valley, elegant and graceful.
You are
Sister Lon? Yunyang felt like he was in a dream. Of the two people in front of him, one was Yun Zuyu, who had apparently died in the fire cave, while the other was Yu Rulon, who had suddenly disappeared. Supreme Flame's beauty and Supreme Wind's fiancé. Two sisters, why are you here? Although it felt like a dream, Yunyang could only rejoice at the moment. He would never think that he was dreaming. In other words, this was the reality, the truth. The two women had truly appeared in front of him, alive and well. They were definitely not fakes. Although Yunyang had a hunch that the two women would not die, he was still overjoyed and comforted to see them appear in front of him, alive and well. We are not the only ones here. Yun Zuyu smiled sweetly and opened the door, saying, "Young brother, please come in." Yunyang understood the meaning of the tone. The anticipation buried deep in his heart rose abruptly as he rushed in impatiently. Sure enough, there were 8 people standing neatly in the room. All 8 of them wore masks, but they were masks that Yunyang was extremely familiar with. Yunyang dashed over with inexplicable joy, his footsteps never stopping, but his heart sank. 8 people? How could there be 8 of them? Could there be a trick in this? In Yunyang's estimation, even under the most optimistic scenario, only Supreme Flame, Supreme Wind, and Supreme Wood would have a higher chance of surviving. As for the eldest, Supreme Earth, Supreme Water, and Supreme Thunder, they were all natives of Tianqian continent or the bound of universe. They did not have the help of the underhand Almighty, so how could they have escaped the death trap that day? If there was a fluke, how could they have watched Yutong's crisis and the various events that would follow? What was going on? His brothers were right in front of him, but Yun Yang was stunned, his hesitation and fear rising. Despite his hesitation, he dared not act rashly, afraid that he would disturb this sweet dream. Even though he was in an illusion, it was just a dream. Yun Yang still hoped that this sweet dream would last a little longer. Once it was broken, the dream would no longer exist, and he would no longer have the chance to reunite with his 8 brothers. Seeing Yun Yang's hasty advance and retreating due to his emotions, his cautious and hesitant demeanor, the 8 of them guffawed in unison.
What?
The majestic Lord Supreme Cloud doesn't know how to speak when he sees us? The one who spoke was Supreme Wind, Ji Lingfeng. This fellow's tone was laced with the air of hypocrisy that Yun Yang was most familiar with. It was as if he had seen a fat pig that had secretly eaten the cabbages that he had been raising for many years. You all, Supreme Wind continued in a sour tone. Oh my, look at our Lord Supreme Cloud. He's really grown up now. He doesn't even know how to say a few polite words when he sees his brothers. The others guffawed. Supreme Earth, the leader of the 9 Supremes, was the first to speak. Young Ninth, we brothers will meet again today. We know that you have countless questions in your heart. Don't be hasty. Take your seats first. Sit tight, sit tight. Let us talk as we eat, one by one. Yun Yang saw his seat at once. It was still the last. Although Yun Zuiyu and Yu Rulan were also present, he was still at the last place, 2 more places lower than before. He sat down dumbly and looked at Supreme Water, who was dressed in a black robe, beside Supreme Earth. He studied her closely. She was wearing a mask and a loose black robe. It was hard to tell that she was a woman. If he could not tell now, he would not have been able to tell back then. However, this familiar feeling calmed him down. He sat down and seemed to have gained more confidence. His heart immediately gave birth to a feeling of stability and comfort that he hadn't felt for a very long time. He shook his head and said with a smile, "All of you are fine. I almost cried until my eyes went blind, and I even killed so many people to avenge all of you. I didn't expect." Sigh. Yun Yang sighed, picking up the goblet of wine in front of him and draining it in one gulp. The brothers all saw his eyes turn red in an instant. They also saw a drop of tear quietly dripping into the wine glass. They saw that he was using the posture of drinking to cover it up, but no one exposed him. They looked at each other, and for a moment, the atmosphere became slightly heavy. Yun Zuyu looked left and right and said with a smile, "Didn't all of you say that you want to play a fun game with Young Ninth? Why aren't all of you talking? Do you still want to play?"
Of course.
Of course we want to play. How can we not play such a fun game?
Ha!
The others guffawed. Then, the 8 people opposite them stood up in unison. Supreme Water sat down again and removed her mask, revealing a gentle and beautiful face. She said, "I think I won't be joining."
Yes.
You're too obvious." The other 7 people chortled. Following which, the 7 masked men gathered together and walked around in a circle. Then with a whoosh, they lined up in a row. Yun Yang glanced over and saw that all 7 of them had removed their masks. What stood before him were 7 young men who looked extremely unfamiliar. All of them stared at Yun Yang without saying a word. Supreme Water chuckled and said, "Young Ninth, why don't you guess who they are? If all of them are right, each of us will drink a goblet. If anyone guesses wrongly, you'll be punished with 8 goblets. That's not too difficult, is it?" The 7 of them gathered together and it was unknown who spoke. If he guesses wrongly, he'll only be punished with 8 goblets. Isn't that too easy for him? The others said in unison, "If he guesses wrongly, we'll beat him up together." Yun Yang guffawed and said, "If I were to even mistake my own brother, I'll accept the punishment willingly. I'll have no complaints even if I'm beaten to death." He then turned to the 7 people and said, "Big brother, I've seen your portrait in Yutong's palace before. You don't have to guess anymore. You and sister-in-law will uphold justice together, all right?" One of the young men was taken aback and said in surprise, "But I've already changed." Once he spoke, he knew that he had been tricked. The others shot him contemptuous glances. Supreme Earth knew that he had let the cat out of the bag. He sighed inwardly and returned to his original appearance. He sat down dejectedly and poured himself a goblet of wine with a long face, saying, "According to what was said, I'll punish myself with a goblet." Then he drained it in one gulp. Chapter 1455. Although he had managed to lure his boss out with a single sentence, Yun did not feel relieved. Moreover, he knew very well that Supreme Earth had done it on purpose. He had fallen for the trap and exposed his weakness. Whether it was the former eldest prince of Yutong or the leader of the Nine Supremes, if he did not even have this little bit of shrewdness and strategy, how could he be trusted? In comparison, as the eldest of the Nine Supremes, it was more appropriate for him to be the judge. It would be difficult to distinguish the remaining few fellows. It was pure nonsense to distinguish them based on their physique and appearance. The 6 of them looked like sextuplets, all of them crossing their arms in front of their chests and looking askance at him. Whether it was their height, weight, or even their expressions, they were all the same. Even if their faces were different, it was useless. Although the 9 Supremes had a deep friendship, they had never seen each other face to face. How could he identify them? Yun scratched his head, deep in thought, but inwardly he was baffled. He wanted to admit defeat. The excuse was ready-made. "Although we are brothers, I have never seen your true faces. How am I supposed to judge?" Although this sentence is easy to say, it is not pleasant to hear. Even if he admitted defeat, he had to identify 1 or 2 of them first. Since it was not right for him to admit defeat, it would be difficult for him to identify the culprit. Yun's mind raced, but the first person he thought of was Ji Lingfeng. With Ji Lingxi's relationship and the sharp voice just now, perhaps he could start from there. He sighed and said, "Actually, this game isn't that difficult to play. Didn't I find out Big Brother's identity in an instant? It's so boring, so boring. My head is full of lumps now. I really don't have the mood to play this." The 6 of them sneered at him but did not speak. Once they did, they would not be fooled. As members of the 9 Supremes, who did not know each other? How could it be so easy to trick us with this little bit of cleverness? Your words just now had ousted Big Brother. That was out of modesty. He didn't want you to lose too badly. Do you think we'll let you go so easily? Yun Zuiyu, who was standing aside, asked, "I see that your cultivation base has improved tremendously and you're full of vigor. Why is your head full of lumps?" Yun sighed and said, "Sister Yu, you don't know this, but my 8th brother Supreme Wind has left on his own, leaving behind a younger sister. Now, his younger sister is pestering me every day. I'm going crazy. Not only is she bad-tempered, but she's also ugly. I only took her in for the sake of my 8th brother. I didn't want to be soft-hearted and get myself into big trouble." Yu Rulan, who was sitting beside Yun Zuiyu, said coldly, "Yun, what nonsense are you spouting?" Then a voice that sounded like it was about to explode rang out, "Brat, say it again." A young man suddenly shot forward like an arrow, like a ferocious tiger about to devour someone. Yun said calmly, "How can I recognize my 8th brother if I don't say so?" "Supreme Wind." Supreme Wind's dashing figure halted at once, his face alternating between red and white as he grimaced in pain. He was still panting as he squinted and said, "Are you really just here to find me?" Yun smiled apologetically. Of course. You have to know that Lingxi is my precious baby. If I wasn't forced into a corner, I wouldn't have said so." It was supposed to be a fawning remark, but Ji Lingfeng's expression turned even darker. He sat down and snorted, muttering, "A fresh flower stuck in cow dung, stained by cow dung. What bad luck." He then poured himself a goblet of wine and finished it. Yu Rulan had already regained her composure as she smiled and said, Good. Great young Master Yun's wisdom is indeed unique. When I meet younger sister Lingxi in the future, I'll have to have a good chat with her about great young Master Yun's wisdom and eloquence." Ji Lingfeng, who was standing aside, was elated to see his wife standing up for him. His annoyance vanished at once. Yun, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. How could he not know that Yu Rulan was standing up for her man? She was also taking revenge on him for making irresponsible remarks. When it came to being close to Ji Lingxi, both Yun and Ji Lingfeng had to stay behind. If his 8th sister-in-law were to casually criticize him, he would have to bear the consequences. Yun quickly lowered his head and smiled apologetically, saying, "8th sister-in-law, you're a discerning person. You've seen how I treated you and Lingxi back then. I was forced into a corner by my unscrupulous brothers. Please be magnanimous and have mercy on me. Yu Rulan's face tightened before she broke into a smile.
Silly boy, I'll spare you.
Yun Yang, who was embarrassed, shifted his gaze to the remaining 5 venerable lords. After observing them for a while, he said in a low voice, "The Bound of Universe's Lei family has been annihilated. The entire family is gone. There are no survivors. When I went over to kill them, I was annihilated immediately. However, I'd never thought that the Lei family's old forefather would be an unexpected figure whom no one could afford to offend." As he finished speaking, the expressions of the 5 people opposite him remained unchanged. However, Yun Yang had already pointed out accurately, "You're my 6th brother." Supreme Lightning. Supreme Lightning guffawed. "Good brother, good move." The matter of the Lei family had always been a knot in Supreme Lightning's heart. Yun Yang had pretended to be friends with Lei Dongtian of the Lei family back then, so he knew a lot about the Lei family. Supreme Lightning was from the Lei family after all. There was always a hint of a Lei family member in his features. In addition, when Yun Yang mentioned the end of the Lei family, there was a slight change in his gaze even though his expression did not change. It was not difficult to identify him. However, the next 4 people were not so easy to identify. Yun Yang was confident that he could identify Supreme Blood by provoking them verbally, but he did not want to use that method. After all, the death of old Dugu's father was the most painful thing in Yun Yang's life. Whenever he thought about it, his heart would ache. How could he use it to his advantage? "I can't recognize the rest of the brothers. Pointing them out randomly will only spoil the fun of this game." Yun Yang admitted defeat, pouring himself 4 goblets of wine and downing them in 1 gulp at a time. He then guffawed.
Great, great.
The brothers smiled at each other and did not say anything else. They sat down together and each of them had a goblet of wine. Supreme Gold, Supreme Wood, Supreme Blood, and Supreme Flame all took their seats. As they drank with him, it was Supreme Gold who said in annoyance, "How could you not recognize me, kid? I clearly gave you hints. Didn't you see such an obvious sword aura?" The others guffawed. After the joke, everyone began to drink again. How could they just drink half a goblet? Brothers, they had reunited today. Of course, they had to drink until they were drunk. This was probably the most enjoyable drink Yun Yang had ever had in his entire life. "Where have you all been all these years? Why? What is going on?" Yun Yang wanted to ask all these questions, but he could not bring himself to ask them when they were at the tip of his tongue. If he really asked, it would not be good. "I thought all of you were dead, but in the end, none of you died. I was the only one like a fool, fighting the world for all of you, risking my life for all of you, suffering all kinds of grievances for all of you, for all of you. In the end, all of you were fine and had even become almighty beings. I, on the other hand, was mediocre." Yun Yang did not want to say these words. However, it did not mean that the others would not speak of it either. 3 rounds of wine later, the lively atmosphere of conversation began to die down. Slowly, everyone stopped talking. After a while, Supreme Gold said in a low voice, "Xiaojiu, there's something I need to tell you." Yun Yang looked up and said, "Second brother, please speak." Supreme Gold said, "We don't know the specifics of what happened back then. During the incident at Tianxian Cliff, we were really dead. This is not false at all. It was only later at a certain point in time that we suddenly regained consciousness. It was also at that point that we realized, or rather, knew that we weren't actually dead. Well, it's not appropriate to put it this way. To be more accurate, our identities in Tianxian continent were already dead. However, to us, it was only an experience in the mortal world. It wasn't our complete selves." This sentence sounded very convoluted, as if it was entangled in the topic of death and immortality. The main point was unclear, but Yun Yang understood it. However, Yun Yang understood it. He understood it right away. At that time, after we confirmed that we were still alive, we turned to check on the situation of the others. Although no one was nearby, we, who had awakened our true identity, quickly gathered again, although not all of us were gathered together. Those who gathered again included your 8th brother, Supreme Wind, Ji Lingfeng. I, Supreme Gold Gu Jiu, would like to talk to Supreme Wood. There was also your 5th brother, Supreme Flame. You still don't know your 5th brother's name, do you? His original name is Rue Huahua. The last one was your 7th brother, Supreme Blood.
Thank you.
I didn't make a mistake. Your seventh brother's name is Xie. Xie as in Xie. Even in such a heavy atmosphere, Yun Yang could not help coughing when he heard the words. This, Rue Huahua? Thank you. What a great name. It was thought-provoking and stirring. The reason we didn't truly perish and could still reunite is mainly because of our extraordinary origins. To put it bluntly, we have people behind us. They're all second-generation cultivators. As for the incident at Tianxian Cliff that day, it was because of the arrangement of an almighty being in the universe. However, there were some changes in the middle that caused the predetermined trajectory to be unbalanced. This so-called unbalance is probably the result of a few strong beings in the universe plotting against each other. The predetermined trajectories of the almighty beings, protecting and balancing each other, caused chaos in time and space, causing changes to occur on their own. The final outcome of the change was difficult for everyone's predetermined predictions. Well, it should be said that no one succeeded. Among them, Big Brother, Sister-in-Law, and your sixth brother Supreme Thunder, were the unluckiest. According to their original life trajectory, Big Brother should have established the 9 Supremes and Sister-in-Law would have assisted him, eventually bringing peace to the world and ruling Tianxian, becoming the immortal legend of an empress. OL sixth, on the other hand, would have stayed dormant in the Tianxian continent for 100 years. After a series of fortuitous encounters, he would have returned to the bound of universe and personally annihilated the Lei family, making a name for himself and becoming the next leader of the Hall of Heroic Souls. However, because of the intervention of those almighty beings, their destinies were forcefully changed and their predetermined life trajectories were disrupted. Supreme Gold Gujiu chuckled bitterly. When we knew the truth, we'd already returned to our physical bodies beyond the 9 heavens. Therefore, we protested together, wanting to bring all of you up. Who would have thought that you'd become the only variable in this world? You'd have a far-reaching impact and you'd be heavily involved, so we couldn't touch you. On the other hand, reviving Big Brother, Sister-in-Law, and OL sixth was nothing. However, after successfully reviving Big Brother, Sister-in-Law, and OL sixth brother, we were all grounded without exception. The reason the adults gave me was that once we appeared, we'd greatly affect you. If you were affected, it'd affect the entire setup. You're already the last hope of the setup. There can't be any deviation. It's only today, when you've come this far, that we're finally allowed to come out and gather with you. However, we're only allowed to stay in the Supreme Heaven Pavilion and can't go out. Then, the Big Brother I've just become sworn brothers with. Yun Yang pondered. He's actually the original setup. Our fathers, on the other hand, are actually the disruptors. No one is considered a good person anyway, so it doesn't matter whether the setup was disruptive or not. Gu Jiu chuckled and went straight to the point. Now, it seems that our father's disruption was successful. After all, you've been successfully preserved. According to the original plan, it should be the child you've helped just now, who will be the one to seize the providence of heaven and earth. Although it's somewhat regrettable and flawed, it's still considered a success. Yun Yang grinned. How else did they expect to succeed? You've already swapped out the main character, okay? What else did they want? There were still regrets and flaws. Yun Yang suddenly felt that his new sworn brother was very aggrieved. The setup that he'd painstakingly set up had been disrupted. The chosen person had been replaced. Helpless and unable to change anything, he could only find a junior to become sworn brothers with, lowering his status to make up for the flaw. It was truly a tragedy, an unspeakable misery. That's not right, Yun Yang said. Then, what about Sister Yu and Sister Lan? Who took them away back then? And the resources they've given me? The one who did it was one of our uncles, fourth Uncle Dong. He's been protecting you in the dark, leaving those things and traces to give you some clues, some hope. Otherwise, you'll be left with an eternal regret. That's a cultivation taboo, said Supreme Gold. I see. With Uncle Dong's help, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to. Speaking of this, Supreme Flame and Supreme Wind's faces were filled with a sorrowful sigh. Yun Zuiyu and Yu Rulan snorted in unison. What's wrong? Yun Yang asked curiously. Now the knot in his heart, his worries, all of his burdens, were no longer a problem. Therefore he was unusually mischievous. As long as you say it, I'll believe it. The reason we were tortured down there was to test us, to see if we were qualified enough to enter their home. Yun Zuiyu snorted, Looking at Supreme Flame, Rue Huahua. Supreme Flame said humbly, I didn't say this. I didn't mean it that way. If I hadn't sought death in the end. So you've done something? Yunziyu asked with a glare. No, it's all your hard work, wifey. Supreme Flame smiled apologetically. Father and mother said they wanted to take a look. I couldn't do anything about it. Why don't we go and make a fuss later? Yunziyu shrunk her neck. I'm not going. It's obviously because you're not determined enough. What does it have to do with father-in-law and mother-in-law? Supreme Flame grimaced. Yes, it's all my fault. Ji Lingfeng was also begging for mercy on the other side. I'm wrong. The group burst out in laughter. As the conversation continued, Yun Yang found out that these fellows were originally engaged to each other. It was only when Supreme Flame and Supreme Wind's incident came out that the original engagement was called off, all of it at once. They were completely handed over to themselves to decide their own lives. They talked a lot and drank a lot of wine. Naturally, a lot of time had passed. Supreme Water then plucked up his courage and said, Xiaojiu, have you seen Bauer before? Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat but his expression did not change. He laughed and said, Bauer is amazing now. Supreme Water was glowing as he asked, How so? Yun Yang said, Bauer is now His Majesty the Empire of Yutong's Emperor. In this world, all lands belong to the Emperor. Those who lead the land are the Emperor's servants. Overlooking the world, I'm the only one in power. Don't you think I'm amazing? Supreme Earth and Supreme Water looked at Yun Yang in shock. Both of them had never thought that they would get such an answer. This is my eldest brother's throne. Of course, I want my nephew to sit on it. Yun Yang said with a smile. The little fellow is very smart and is indeed made to be an emperor. He's the only heir to the throne of Yutong. I'm not the only one who believes this. His Majesty the Old Emperor also. It's because of his approval that Bauer can succeed the throne. Supreme Water was beaming as he raised his goblet and clinked it against Yun Yang's. Xiaojiu, thank you very much. Holding his goblet, Yun Yang asked casually. You guys probably have nothing to worry about now. You're probably freer than me. When you're free, you can go and see for yourself. Bauer is doing very well now. The continent has long been unified and belongs to Yutong. Supreme Earth chuckled humorlessly and said, How can we appear in Yutong again? If we do, what will we be? Actually, we've only come here to meet you today and we're still in this state. In reality, we've already gone to another world. Supreme Water was a little disappointed as well as he said, I'm relieved to know that Bauer is safe. The cycle of life and death. Although the cause and effect cannot be concealed, this life and death has severed a lot after all. She sat in silence and suddenly, tears rolled down her cheeks in a daze. How could a mother not miss her son? Even if she spoke with certainty, how could she bear it? Yun Yang was relieved but his heart tightened at the same time. He did not know if what he had done was right but he really did not want Supreme Earth and Supreme Water to see Bauer now and know what the Emperor of Yutong had done. If they knew what this child had done, would they not be extremely disappointed? Besides, many things had already happened and could no longer be undone. Chapter 1456. If it's just to see Bauer, it's not that difficult. Yun Yang said with a smile, as long as we visualize the Empire of Yutong's capital, Tiantang City, with the aid of corresponding treasures, we should be able to lock onto the current scene of Tiantong's capital and fulfill big brother and sister-in-law's wish to see their son. Not bad. This is a good idea. If we can see Bauer once, it'll be enough. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water turned to look at their brothers, their faces filled with hope. Their cultivation base was already at an extremely high level, not below Yun Yang's, but when it came to wealth, they could not compare to Supreme Gold and the other heirlooms. At the very least, they could not produce the treasures that Yun Yang had mentioned. Yun Yang smiled and winked at Supreme Gold, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally. Lord Gold, who was still wondering why Yun Yang had touched on his sore spot, understood immediately and laughed. Big brother, I only know that both of you have been holding it in all these years, but it's a pity that we have no choice but to do so. Both of you can't go down to Tianxian to see your son, aren't we the same? Sigh. The others also had depressed expressions on their faces. Supreme Wind said, However, if the few of us were to reappear in Yutong, it'd be too shocking. The world would be in chaos. Besides, Our reunion this time is all thanks to Supreme Heaven Pavilion's opportunity. Once Yun Yang leaves the pavilion, this opportunity will end. It'll be impossible for us to go out personally. Supreme Earth said, "Second brother, you're exaggerating. We've been together all these years. We've taken care of each other. There's nothing I can't do. It's just that your sister-in-law misses the child. It's best if I can take a look at him, but if I can't, then it's fine." Supreme Gold said, "It's probably fate. Not long ago, my father passed me a mystical arcane skill that can be used here. It's just that my cultivation base is still shallow and can't be used for too long. Perhaps, I can only look after him for a while before I'll be powerless and unable to continue." Supreme Water said excitedly, "As long as I can take a look, it'll be enough." Tears glistened in her eyes. Apparently, she was so excited by this pleasant surprise that she couldn't control herself. Her son. When he left home for the last time, he must have been only 5 or 6 years old. Such a young child, how did he survive all these years? How did he grow so big? Today, he was the emperor of a nation, the sovereign of the continent, overlooking the world and suppressing the 4 seas. Gu Zhou didn't waste any more words. He began to circulate his divine ability, and a misty ray of light immediately penetrated out. Everyone's gazes focused on it. It was a marvelous sight. The clear light pierced through the void, and no one knew where it went. After a while, a ball of light suddenly appeared and slowly rotated. Then, for some reason it turned into a picture. Everybody looked up and saw everything clearly. It was Yutong's palace. It was the site of the empire of Yutong's capital, Tiantang City, that everyone had not seen for a long time. The scene quickly stretched, and in an instant, it had already changed to the scene of the emperor attending morning court. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water straightened their backs at the same time, staring at the screen without blinking, afraid that they would miss the slightest detail. Although the image was clearly visible, as if it could be touched with one's hand, there was no sound, which was a fly in the ointment. In spite of this, Supreme Water's tears were streaming down her cheeks, her heart pounding. Sitting on the throne, the young emperor, who was overflowing with dominance, had 3 distinct black moles on his left eyebrow. It was the unique trait of her son. In the picture, the young emperor's gaze was authoritative, his actions domineering. His every word and action was filled with an aura of a sovereign overlooking the world. As he spoke, his gaze merely swept across the room, but the heavy emperor's aura could almost be felt through the picture. The officials bowed their heads, trembling in fear. In the solemn hall, there was only one main character, one voice. That was the emperor, dictating everything, the sole ruler of the world. Supreme Water stared unblinkingly at the picture, at the emperor on the other side. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Those were tears of joy, tears of a mother's pride and happiness. Finally, she could not hold it in any longer, leaning against Supreme Earth and sobbing softly. Even as she sobbed, her gaze was glued to the young emperor's face in the picture. At this moment, the young emperor seemed to be enraged, reprimanding something loudly. He held a memorial in his hand, pointing and shouting before slamming it on the table abruptly. Immediately, an official was seen kneeling down, kowtowing like he was pounding garlic as he pleaded. Then, a golden palace guard came over and dragged the official out. Supreme Gold's face was pale as he said, "This young brother's cultivation base is shallow, I really can't take it anymore." Supreme Earth and Supreme Water did not say a word, still staring at the young emperor's face in the picture. They looked at him longingly, sighing softly. "Take it," Supreme Earth said. Just as he uttered a word, Supreme Gold's face turned unusually pale and the picture disappeared. Supreme Wood, who was beside him, seemed to be prepared. He grabbed a bunch of medicinal pills and tossed them into Supreme Gold's mouth, focusing on recuperating. Supreme Earth's expression was rather blank while Supreme Water's face was covered in tears. Yun Zuiyu and Yu Rulan comforted her from the side. "Don't be sad, sister-in-law. The child is so promising, becoming the emperor that unites Tianxian throughout the ages, the legend of the emperor. Just look at his domineering aura and imperial demeanor. It's something to be congratulated and comforted. We can't wait to be envious. Why is sister-in-law crying?" That's right. I'm not crying. I'm happy." Supreme Water was sobbing as she wiped her tears. She said she was crying tears of joy, But no one knew that the motherly heart was actually grieving for not being able to see her beloved son again. For a moment, everyone present was quiet, or at least, they appeared to be quiet. The young emperor in the picture made everyone feel emotional. Wise and mighty, domineering and unparalleled, he controlled the universe with ease. This was indeed the aura of a peerless overlord, genuine and genuine. This was the original intention of the 9 Supremes. However, Bao, a child who had been placed in a remote village since he was young, how did he train to where he was today? Everyone's gaze was focused on Yun Yang. No one was around then, only Yun Yang was there. He was the only one who cared about the child, who had brought him out, trained him, fought for the throne, and protected the child in the face of countless open and hidden attacks. Yet, how much hard work had he gone through to get to where he was today? The immense effort, the level of mental and physical exertion, the meticulous planning. It was something that no one could imagine. Furthermore, Yun Yang did not have his current formidable cultivation base or pinnacle combat power back then. He had only been in an unusually dangerous situation. His brothers had all died in battle. The enemy was strange and unbeatable. He had to seek revenge, protect his family and country, go to the battlefield, go against the martial world forces in the dark, and take care of the child that his eldest brother did not entrust to him, but he had to do so. All of these had been completed in a few short years. Thinking about it, everyone could not help but suck in a sharp breath. How did Yun Yang do it? Supreme Earth and Supreme Water exchanged a look and stood up at the same time, raising their goblets. Supreme Water spoke. "Ninth brother. Your eldest brother, and I won't say anything more. We're brothers, ninth brother." She could not continue, her face flushed with excitement. Pulling her husband's hand, she raised her goblet and downed it. Yun Yang stood up hurriedly and downed the wine in his cup with a half bow. He said respectfully, "Fourth sister, please don't put all the credit on me. The others have also contributed greatly. Bao being able to reach where he is today is mostly because he was born to be an emperor. All of you have seen it just now. There are some things that can't be cultivated just by nurturing." Supreme Earth and Supreme Water looked at each other and smiled, not refuting what he had said. How could they not know that? Yun Yang's words were reasonable, but if it were not for his help, so what if he was an emperor? Even though the brothers did not have to talk about it, they had to remember it in their hearts. The others stood up as well. Gujiu said, "Xiaojiu, we would like to toast you as well. This cup is what you should drink. No one is more qualified than you to enjoy this toast." Supreme Gold, Supreme Flame, Supreme Wind, Supreme Thunder and the rest raised their goblets and drained them in one go. Their gazes on Yun Yang were filled with praise and comfort. If it were anyone else sitting in Yun Yang's position, they would not dare to boast that they could do better than him. After his brothers left, Yun Yang had fought alone. To be able to get to where he was now was already an answer sheet that was even more perfect than perfection. Yun Yang chuckled bitterly. The change had come too fast and too ruthlessly. He had persevered and walked step by step to where he was today because he did not have a long-term plan. It was more because he did not want to give up. He did not want all his brother's efforts to go down the drain. He had decided to take things one step at a time. Everything before him was perfect in everyone's eyes. But when he thought about how Bao's current situation had long deviated from the trajectory he had originally planned, Yun Yang's heart raced. After some thought, Yun Yang said, "Speaking of Bao, this child, he is indeed born to be an emperor. If His Majesty the old emperor hadn't recognized this, he wouldn't have kept him by his side so early. Being the crown prince is an innate gift, not one that can be taught by a later generation. He has his own understanding of the art of being an emperor, the art of trickery, the art of balance, and even the art of darkness. Now that he has become the emperor of the Empire of Yutong, this young brother is naturally happy. However, the only flaw is that Bao's desire for power and control is a little too strong." He looked at Supreme Earth sincerely and said, "This young brother really doesn't dare to claim credit for not teaching the child well. I can only feel ashamed." Supreme Earth laughed and said, "Xiaojiu, do you think I don't know what you're worried about? The art of being an emperor is a compulsory course for the successor of the royal family. Wasn't your big brother also the crown prince back then?" Although it was only a glimpse just now, the old faces in the imperial court were all gone, replaced by new and unfamiliar faces. This has already explained a lot. Bao's domineering aura, overbearing yet lacking in the way of an emperor. It only proves that my hunch is correct. He stopped laughing and sucked in a soft breath, saying, Xiaojiu, we're brothers. I understand your character and I know the personality of the descendant you're looking forward to. However, there's a saying that goes well. The children and grandchildren have their own blessings. It's Bao-Er's luck and destiny that he can come this far and control the world. We're very satisfied. No matter how he is or what his future will be like, as his uncle, you've already done too much to pave the way for him. From now on, even if that child causes the wrath of the heavens and the people, or if he acts perversely and cruelly, it's the path he's chosen. In the Tianxian continent, the world is united and the seas are at peace. It's the best that this world is guarded by an emperor throughout the ages, but it's really only our ideal. The reality is different. It's all fate and destiny. Supreme Earth laughed heartily and said, Xiaojiu, as your elder brother, I'd like to thank you once again. I can't say anything else. Your sister-in-law and I are already satisfied to be able to take a look at this scene today. We have no more regrets. We can't see the child's future and we won't interfere. Yun Yang heaved a sigh of relief. Big brother, it's great that you can think this way. Supreme Water wiped away her tears and said, This child, when he was young, your big brother said that he's a little cold by nature and has a strong desire to control. We understand the unfinished meaning in your words. She rubbed her eyes and said, Because both of us aren't always by the child's side, he's been willful since he was young. In addition, there's no one to control him. This willfulness is even more severe. His possessiveness and desire to control are extremely strong. I still remember that time when I brought back a few toys and said that I'd share them with the children in the village tomorrow. Bao-Er picked one first. However, he woke up in the middle of the night and smashed the rest. Your big brother and I beat the child up, but we didn't pursue the matter further. Since then, we didn't have many chances to meet each other. However, the child's nature was on full display. It said that he grows old when he's 3 years old. The old saying isn't a lie. Now that I think about it, it was right and wrong for us to hide him in the mountain village that day. Keeping him hidden all year round was out of consideration for his safety, but we neglected that when he came out of the mountain village, he had already developed a sense of inferiority and sensitivity. Even after he became the emperor, he still had it. Therefore, he didn't allow other voices in the imperial court and officials he couldn't control. He didn't allow anyone in the imperial court who could reprimand him or obstruct him at any time. I've thought of this when I saw the scene. I only hope that the bosses didn't die because of him. Supreme Water said softly, This is all Bao-Er's fault. If he really did kill the bosses, then we, husband and wife, will definitely give them an explanation. Yun Yang shook his head and said, The bosses aren't dead. I've arranged a very safe place for them to spend their remaining years in peace. You don't have to worry about this. As he spoke, he gave a detailed explanation of his arrangements. Supreme Earth and Supreme Water heaved a long sigh of relief after listening to him. That's good, that's good. Their children would have their own blessings. Seeing Bao-Er and knowing of Yun Yang's arrangements, Supreme Earth and Supreme Water finally felt relieved and were in high spirits again. Brothers, where have you been all this time? Yun Yang began to ask. We've been roaming around in the boss realm. We haven't gone anywhere during this period of time. Of course, we've gone to other realms to train occasionally. Gujiu coughed. Boss realm. Yun Yang looked at Supreme Earth. Not the boss Supreme Earth. We're talking about the other boss. Gujiu said, Wait for you. Wait for you. Cough, cough. Wait for you to break through the starry sky and see your true nature. Then, you'll be able to see this boss. To be honest, you're actually this boss's cousin.